It was a typical Thursday morning when Elon Musk received the letter. The sunlight streamed through the windows of his office at SpaceX headquarters, casting long shadows over the cluttered desk. He was working on the latest prototype for the next-generation rocket when his assistant, Jane, knocked lightly on the door. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Mr. Musk, she said, holding out a plain white envelope. You've got a letter. Elon glanced up, momentarily distracted from his work. He wasn't expecting any correspondence, especially not on a day as hectic as today. But something about the simplicity of the envelope caught his eye. No return address, no fancy stamps, just a crisp, clean surface. He opened it. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, typed in a precise, elegant font. It read, "I know this may come as a surprise, but I am issuing you a challenge. A challenge of intellect, of science, and of curiosity. You've built rockets, created electric cars, and dreamed of reaching Mars. But now I want to see if your mind is truly as capable as they say. My name is Isaac Thompson. I'm 12 years old, and I have a mind like Hawking's. I can think in ways you may not fully understand, but I'm willing to show you. If you accept my challenge, I'll be waiting. You can find me at the address below. Don't be late. Isaac Thompson." Elon stared at the letter in disbelief. A 12-year-old? With a mind like Stephen Hawking's? The nerve of this kid. But there was something about the audacity of the message that intrigued him. Musk wasn't a man who backed down from a challenge, especially when it came to the frontiers of knowledge. "Jane," he called out, still holding the letter. "Do we have any information on this kid?" Jane shook her head. "No records, no public profiles. He seems to be a ghost." Elon's curiosity deepened. A ghost? An anonymous genius who wanted to challenge him? Something told him this wasn't just a prank. It felt different. He turned the letter over. There, in fine print at the bottom, was an address, 7424 Oakwood Drive, Palo Alto, California. Without a second thought, Elon made a decision. He couldn't resist. He had to see this kid, to see if he was truly a prodigy, or just another case of overblown confidence. "Prepare a flight to Palo Alto. We're going to meet Isaac Thompson," he said, the excitement barely contained in his voice. That evening, Elon arrived in Palo Alto. The address led him to a quiet, unassuming house on a tree-lined street. It was a far cry from the sprawling SpaceX facilities or Tesla's high-tech campuses. In fact, the house looked almost too normal. As he parked in front, Elon felt a ripple of uncertainty, but he quickly brushed it off. He rang the doorbell. Moments later, a boy, no older than 12, with messy brown hair and wide, curious eyes, opened the door. "You must be Elon Musk," Isaac said, his voice calm and confident. "I am," Elon replied, intrigued by the poise the child exuded. "And you must be Isaac." Isaac nodded and stepped aside, gesturing for Elon to enter. Inside, the house was quiet. The walls were lined with bookshelves, filled with volumes on physics, technology, and space exploration. Isaac led Elon down a hallway to a small, cluttered room that looked more like a lab than a bedroom. A desk was littered with notes, equations, and several laptops. On the wall, there was a large whiteboard filled with complex formulas and theories. "I like to keep things simple," Isaac said with a grin. "This is where the real work happens." Elon took a seat in the corner, taking in the scene. He had met a lot of brilliant minds in his career, but none quite like this. Isaac wasn't just another child prodigy who memorized facts. He had a deep understanding of complex concepts, far beyond his years. "Impressive," Elon said. "So, tell me, Isaac, what's the challenge you have for me?" Isaac smiled again, his eyes sparkling with something that could only be described as a mix of excitement and determination. "You're a genius at building things, Elon. Rockets, cars, tunnels. But I want to know if you can think the way I do. If you can grasp the bigger picture. It's not about just building. It's about understanding the universe. The question I have for you is, can you think in terms of the unthinkable?" Elon raised an eyebrow. "The unthinkable? I'm not sure I follow." Isaac walked over to his whiteboard and pointed to a particular equation. "This is my theory," he said, his finger tracing the lines on the board. "It's a new way of looking at quantum mechanics, one that could fundamentally change how we approach energy and space travel. I believe it holds the key to unlocking sustainable energy for humanity." Elon stood and approached the board. The formula was complex, but there was a certain elegance to it. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. "You've been working on this yourself?" Elon asked, a hint of awe in his voice. Isaac nodded. "I started when I was 8. I've been developing it ever since. I know it's right, but I need someone who thinks on the same scale to see it too." Elon was stunned. A 12-year-old had come up with a theory that could change the world? It was insane, but at the same time, it felt like the kind of breakthrough that only someone with extraordinary vision could dream up. "All right, Isaac," Elon said, leaning against the desk. "You've got my attention. What do you want from me?" Isaac smiled widely. "I want you to prove me wrong, or prove me right. I want you to help me take this theory to the next level." Elon paused, then nodded slowly. "I accept, but this won't be easy. Are you sure you're ready?" Isaac didn't hesitate. "I was born ready." As Elon left the house that night, his mind was buzzing with possibilities. Isaac Thompson was no ordinary child, and whatever this challenge was going to be, it was going to be unlike anything he had ever faced. Elon Musk had accepted the challenge of his life. The question was, what would happen next? Would Isaac's theory revolutionize the world, or would it lead them both down a dangerous path? One thing was certain. This story was just beginning. Elon couldn't sleep that night. His mind was racing with thoughts of Isaac Thompson, the 12-year-old boy who seemed to possess a brilliance that defied everything Elon knew about childhood and intellect. It wasn't just the theory on quantum mechanics Isaac had shown him. It was the child himself, the calm confidence, the laser focus, the way he talked about the universe as though he had already discovered its deepest secrets. The next morning, Elon arrived at Isaac's house earlier than expected. He wanted to understand more about the mind behind the challenge. Who was Isaac Thompson, really? And how had he come to possess such a profound understanding of the world? Isaac was already awake when Elon knocked on the door, his expression unbothered by the early hour. "I was hoping you'd come back soon," Isaac said, leading Elon inside. "I've been reviewing some of the feedback you gave me last night on the equations." Elon raised an eyebrow. "You've been working on it all night?" Isaac nodded, his eyes scanning over the scattered papers and notes on his desk. "I don't sleep much. I think better when I'm awake." The room smelled faintly of coffee and old books, and Elon could see that Isaac wasn't just a theoretical genius. He was a hands-on learner. The desk was filled with notebooks, some of them worn and dog-eared from constant use. There were also several mechanical gadgets scattered across the room, a mix of unfinished projects and prototypes that Isaac had likely tinkered with during his free time. "You've been doing this for a while," Elon said, sitting down in the same chair he had occupied the previous night. Isaac gave a half-shrug. "I started when I was about 8. I didn't always know what I was doing at first, but then I realized there's a way to solve everything. It's like a puzzle, and if you break the pieces down to their most basic form, they're solvable." Elon studied Isaac for a moment, trying to imagine the boy's life. Isaac's face was a mix of innocence and determination, as if the weight of his thoughts was too great to be fully understood by those around him. His hair was messy, as if he had run his hands through it too many times in frustration or deep thought. There was an intensity about him that Elon could relate to, someone who was driven by the pursuit of knowledge, no matter the cost. "You said you started when you were 8, Elon asked. "How did you even get into something like this at such a young age?" Isaac looked away for a moment, his gaze drifting toward the window as though remembering something distant. "My mom," Isaac said quietly. "She's a physicist, too. She would talk to me about space and energy and the universe when I was really little. She said the world doesn't always make sense, but if you look at the patterns, everything is connected. It was from her that I got my love for solving problems." Elon felt a pang of empathy. He had always respected the power of a good mentor, and it was clear that Isaac's mother had been an immense influence on him. She had given him the tools to think beyond his years, to see the world as a puzzle to be solved, rather than a set of rigid rules. "So your mom, she's a scientist?" Elon asked, genuinely curious. Isaac nodded. She works at a university, but she doesn't really get the recognition she deserves. People don't like to take her seriously because she's a woman. But I know what she can do. And I know she's right about the way things work. I just wanted to take her ideas further. I wanted to push the boundaries she couldn't. Elon was silent for a moment, reflecting on what Isaac had said. The weight of the boy's words was striking. Here was someone so young, yet so deeply invested in understanding the world, and in trying to solve problems that most adults would dismiss as beyond their grasp. And now, he had come to Elon with a challenge. "You're clearly not like other kids," Elon said, breaking the silence. "I've met some brilliant minds in my time, but none quite like you." Isaac's lips curved into a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I don't need to be like other kids. I just need to be the best version of myself." Elon was taken aback. For a moment, he saw not just a child prodigy, but someone with a deep sense of purpose, a purpose that was bigger than himself. "I want to help you, Isaac," Elon said, his voice serious. "But we have to be careful. The kind of theories you're working with, they could change the world, but they could also put you in danger." Isaac met his gaze, his eyes unwavering. "I know, but I'm not afraid of that. I'm willing to take the risk if it means I can make a difference." Elon leaned back in his chair, considering Isaac's words. The boy wasn't just brilliant, he was fearless. And that kind of fearlessness could either lead to great success or catastrophic failure. "I've seen a lot of risk in my career, Isaac," Elon said, a slight smile creeping across his face. "But I think we can take this one on together. Let's see what you've got. Show me how we can take this theory of yours further." Isaac's eyes lit up. "You mean it?" Elon nodded. "But you'll have to prove it. If you can show me how your theory works, how it can change the future, then I'm all in. But we're going to do it the right way. We're going to build it step by step." Isaac grinned. "Deal." Later that afternoon, they sat down to review Isaac's theory in detail. As Elon listened to Isaac explain the complex equations, the concepts began to click in a way they hadn't before. Isaac's mind didn't work like other people's. He didn't just look at things through the lens of current knowledge. He looked beyond it, to what could be. It was as if he was seeing the blueprint of the universe itself. "You've got something big here," Elon said after a long pause. "This could change everything: energy, space travel, even how we interact with technology on a daily basis." "But," Isaac leaned forward. "But what?" Elon hesitated. "It's dangerous. We're talking about unlocking a fundamental law of the universe. If this is real, there are people who won't want us to succeed. You have to be prepared for that." Isaac didn't flinch. "I'm ready. I've always been ready." Elon paused. "All right then. We'll need to test it. But before we move forward, I want to know more about you, Isaac. About your life, your history. You've got to be the right person for this, because if we're going to change the world, I need to know you can handle it." Isaac looked Elon square in the eyes. "I'm not like other kids. I've always known that. But if you want to know more, I'll tell you everything." And just like that, the stage was set. The pieces of the puzzle had started to fall into place. But as Isaac had already shown, the world was not going to hand them answers easily. Together, they were about to embark on a journey that could change the course of human history, or destroy everything they knew. Elon spent the following days carefully reviewing Isaac's theory. He pored over the equations, rechecked the calculations, and consulted his team at SpaceX and Tesla for their insights. The deeper he dug into Isaac's work, the more impressed he became. Isaac's genius was not just in his raw intellect. It was in his ability to think beyond the established rules of science, to bend the boundaries of physics to create something completely new. But as Elon's fascination grew, so did his concern. There were implications to Isaac's theory that reached far beyond space exploration or energy generation. This could alter the very fabric of reality itself. He had to know more about Isaac, more about how a 12-year-old boy could come up with something so groundbreaking. And so, Elon returned to Isaac's house, determined to find out who Isaac truly was, and why he had chosen him for this challenge. Isaac was at his desk again when Elon arrived, a faint trace of exhaustion in his eyes, but no sign of giving up. The boy seemed relentless, driven by something deeper than curiosity. When Elon walked in, Isaac barely glanced up from his work. "Morning," Elon said, setting down his bag. "How's the theory coming along?" Isaac shrugged but smiled. "It's fine. I've made a few adjustments, but it's all coming together. I've been thinking about our next step, how we can begin testing the energy equations practically." Elon sat down across from Isaac, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop wondering about the boy's past, about the forces that had shaped him into someone capable of such brilliance. "You know, Isaac," Elon said, leaning forward, "this isn't the first time I've come across a genius. But you're different. There's something about the way you think. It's as if you've seen things that no one else has." Isaac's face softened for a moment, but then the usual calm returned. "Maybe it's because I've been working on this for longer than you think." Elon paused. "What do you mean?" Isaac met his gaze, his expression hardening. "I wasn't just born with this ability, Elon. I had help. My mom. She's the one who first started teaching me about physics, about how everything connects. But she didn't just teach me facts. She taught me how to question everything. I think she knew something. Something that led me to this." Elon raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, knew something?" Isaac didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to his bookshelf, running his fingers along the spines of the books. He pulled one from the shelf, its cover worn from years of use. It was an old, leather-bound journal with pages filled with handwritten notes and equations. He handed it to Elon. "This was my mom's," Isaac said quietly. "She left it for me when she disappeared." Elon took the journal carefully. The weight of it felt different from the other books in Isaac's room. As he flipped through the pages, he saw more than just equations. There were cryptic notes about quantum entanglement, black holes, and wormholes, ideas far beyond anything most physicists would dare to touch. But what stood out most were the references to something called the catalyst, a concept Isaac's mother had clearly spent years investigating. "Elon, this isn't just about energy or space travel," Isaac continued, his voice growing more serious. "It's about altering the very fabric of the universe. My mom was working on something before she disappeared. She called it the catalyst. I think she discovered something that could change everything, and I think it's why she disappeared." Elon's heart raced. "What do you mean, disappeared?" Isaac turned away, looking out the window. "When I was 10, my mom went missing. She was working on a project, trying to unlock the secrets of this catalyst. One night, she told me she was close to a breakthrough, but the next morning, she was gone. No trace. No explanation." Elon felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a scientific breakthrough Isaac was after. It was something more personal, something that tied into the boy's very identity. The catalyst sounded like something that had consumed Isaac's mother, and now it was consuming Isaac as well. "Do you think the catalyst has something to do with your theory?" Elon asked. Isaac nodded slowly. "I don't just think it's connected. I think my mom's work on the catalyst is the foundation of everything I'm doing. I think I'm picking up where she left off. I have to finish it. For her." Elon was quiet for a long moment, taking in what Isaac had said. The theory was no longer just about revolutionary energy sources or space travel. It was deeply personal. Isaac wasn't just trying to prove his brilliance to the world. He was trying to finish the work that his mother had started, work that might have led to her disappearance. "You're not just a genius," Elon said, his voice low. "You're carrying a legacy." Isaac nodded. "Yeah, but I'm also carrying a burden. The catalyst, if it works, it could change everything. But it could also destroy everything. I need to understand it fully before anyone else gets their hands on it." Elon put the journal down, meeting Isaac's eyes. "We're in this together now. Whatever your mom was working on, we'll figure it out. But you have to understand, this isn't just a challenge anymore. This is dangerous." Isaac's expression softened, but there was still a flicker of determination behind his gaze. "I know, but I'm not backing down. I can't." Elon studied Isaac for a long moment, weighing the risks. This wasn't the simple scientific puzzle he had thought it was. This was personal, dangerous, and potentially world-altering. But if Isaac was right, if he could unlock the catalyst, it could be the most important breakthrough in history. "I'm with you," Elon said finally. "But we do this carefully. We need to be prepared for anything. Isaac smiled. It was the first time he had shown a true sense of relief. I'm ready. As Elon stood up to leave, a new weight settled over him. He had known that working with Isaac would be risky, but now, the stakes were higher than ever. They weren't just pushing the boundaries of science anymore. They were walking into the unknown, chasing a legacy that had already claimed one life. And there was no turning back. The following weeks were a blur of late nights, intricate calculations, and endless research. Elon had brought in some of the brightest minds from SpaceX and Tesla, but Isaac's work was like nothing any of them had encountered before. Every equation seemed to unlock something new, a deeper understanding of the universe, as though Isaac was tapping into a hidden truth that had been waiting to be discovered for centuries. But as the pieces came together, so did the realization. This was no ordinary breakthrough. The deeper they went, the more Elon understood Isaac's concerns. This wasn't just a new energy source or a breakthrough in quantum physics. Isaac's theory, the catalyst, was a potential weapon. It could reshape the very fabric of reality, but it could also unravel it entirely. One evening, after a particularly long day of brainstorming, Isaac called Elon into his lab. The boy's expression was grave, his usually bright eyes now shadowed with something darker. Something was different. I think I've found it, Isaac said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of tension. Elon took a seat across from him. Isaac had been working with even more focus lately, and Elon could tell something big was about to unfold. The blackboard behind Isaac was filled with dense equations and diagrams, but there was one central figure, a symbol that Elon hadn't seen before. It was a swirling, fractal-like pattern that seemed to pulse with an almost magnetic energy. What is that? Elon asked, pointing to the symbol. Isaac's fingers hovered over the chalkboard, tracing the pattern. This is the key to the catalyst. I believe it's the equation that can stabilize the energy flux we're dealing with. If we can manipulate it, we could theoretically open a stable wormhole or even alter the fundamental constants of physics. Elon's heart skipped a beat. You're talking about opening a wormhole? That's... I know, Isaac interrupted, but it's not just about space travel. It's about controlling the very fabric of the universe. Energy, time, space, everything. The catalyst is supposed to be a bridge, a way to manipulate the building blocks of reality itself. Elon stared at the symbol, a creeping unease settling in his chest. It was brilliant, terrifying, and completely beyond anything he had ever imagined. The implications were staggering. If this worked, they could literally bend the laws of nature. But then, a thought struck him. If your mom was working on this, why didn't she finish it? What happened to her? Isaac's face darkened. That's what I need to figure out. I think she uncovered something dangerous. Something that, if unleashed, could change everything or destroy it. Elon stood up and paced around the room, his mind racing. If we do this, Isaac, there's no turning back. We're not just pushing the boundaries of science anymore. We're meddling with the very fabric of existence. There's too much risk, too much danger. Isaac turned to face him, his eyes burning with intensity. I'm not afraid of the risk. I need to finish this. I need to know what happened to my mom. And I believe this equation, holds the answers. If we don't do it, someone else will. Someone who doesn't understand what they're dealing with. Elon felt a chill. He could sense the conviction in Isaac's voice, but he also recognized the dangerous edge of obsession. Isaac wasn't just trying to solve a problem. He was trying to uncover the truth, and that truth might be more than either of them could handle. We'll need to proceed carefully, Elon said finally. We'll take it one step at a time. First, we stabilize the equation. Then we test it. But we have to keep everything contained. No one can know what we're doing, not yet. Isaac nodded. Agreed. The next few days were spent in frantic preparation. Elon brought in a few trusted colleagues from his various companies, including his top engineers and physicists. They built specialized equipment designed to handle the immense energy fluctuations Isaac's equation would create. They designed a secure facility deep beneath the SpaceX complex, hidden from the public eye. If they were going to try this, they had to do it far from prying eyes. Isaac, for his part, worked tirelessly, tweaking his equations and refining the calculations. The closer they got to their first test, the more Elon's unease grew. The boy's obsession was growing, too. Isaac had started speaking in terms of inevitability. He wasn't asking for permission anymore. He was demanding that they proceed. It was clear he saw the catalyst as his legacy, and nothing, not even Elon Musk, was going to stand in his way. The day of the test finally arrived. Elon and Isaac stood side by side in the control room beneath the SpaceX facility, overlooking a massive chamber where the equipment had been set up. The air was thick with tension as the team gathered around, preparing to initiate the first phase of the experiment. "We're ready," one of Elon's engineers said, his voice tense. Elon glanced at Isaac. The boy was quiet, his face pale, but his eyes were alight with the kind of focus Elon had rarely seen. This was it, the moment where everything would change. Isaac stepped forward, his hands hovering over the control panel. "We begin in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A sudden hum filled the room, followed by a deep, vibrating thrum as the energy machines began to activate. The swirling pattern on the screen flickered to life, matching the symbol on Isaac's chalkboard. Slowly, a glowing blue light began to pulse at the center of the chamber. Elon's heart raced. The power in the room was palpable. The air felt thick, charged with the kind of energy that shouldn't exist in the real world. Isaac's equation was working. It was happening. The catalyst was opening. But as the light grew brighter, Elon's unease turned to fear. The room began to shake. The walls trembled. A high-pitched screech echoed from the equipment, and the energy readings spiked beyond anything the monitors had been calibrated for. "I think we're exceeding the safety limits," one of the engineers shouted. Isaac's eyes were wide with exhilaration. "It's working. It's actually working. This is what my mom was working on. This is it." But Elon could see the numbers on the monitors now, and they were going wild. The energy was reaching levels that should have been impossible to sustain. The catalyst was not just opening. It was tearing at the fabric of space itself. "Shut it down," Elon ordered, but Isaac didn't move. The boy was completely absorbed in the moment, his obsession now fully unleashed. "It's too late," Isaac said, his voice trembling with excitement. "We're about to unlock the full potential of the catalyst. This is history. We're changing everything." Elon's mind raced. They were standing on the precipice of something that could either save humanity or end it. In that instant, the world seemed to blur. The lights flickered, the air grew cold, and a crackling sound filled the room as if reality itself was being torn apart. And then, in the blink of an eye, everything stopped. For a moment, time itself seemed to stand still. The entire room was flooded with an eerie silence. The blue glow that had been pulsing at the center of the chamber vanished in an instant, replaced by an unsettling stillness that hung in the air like the calm before a storm. Elon stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest, his mind trying to process what had just happened. The monitors in front of him were flickering erratically, showing data that was impossible to interpret. The energy readings had dropped to 0, then spiked again. But it wasn't just the numbers that unsettled him. It was the strange sense of disorientation that now seemed to pulse through the room. The walls appeared to shimmer, as if they weren't quite real anymore. Isaac stood motionless beside him, his expression a mixture of confusion and awe. His usually calm demeanor had evaporated. It was as though he, too, couldn't believe what was happening. What just happened?" Isaac whispered. Elon didn't answer immediately. He was too focused on the bizarre readings on the screens, the fluctuations in the environment. The air felt thick, charged, and something was off. Something fundamental had changed. The energy they had harnessed, unleashed, had caused an anomaly, but what kind of anomaly was it? He turned to one of his engineers. "Run a diagnostic," he ordered. "What's happening to the energy levels?" The engineer frantically typed into his console, his fingers flying over the keys. After a moment, he looked up, his face pale. I don't know, Mr. Musk," the engineer stammered. "The energy readings they're erratic. It's like the system is experiencing a feedback loop, but the feedback is outside the normal parameters. This shouldn't be possible." Elon's mind raced. Something had gone horribly wrong. The catalyst wasn't just a breakthrough, it was a distortion. They had touched something they weren't prepared for. Isaac turned to Elon, his eyes wide. What do we do now? Elon swallowed hard. His usual calm confidence was slipping, replaced by a growing sense of dread. We stop the experiment. Now, we have to stabilize the energy before it escalates further. But as Elon began to move toward the control panel to initiate the shutdown, something strange happened. The air in the room shimmered again, as if the fabric of space itself were warping. The temperature dropped, and an almost tangible pressure built in the atmosphere. Then, without warning, the lights flickered, then went out entirely. For a heartbeat, there was complete darkness. And then came a sound. A low, resonant hum, followed by a violent crack, like a rupture in space itself. Before anyone could react, the walls of the chamber seemed to twist and bend, as if they were made of rubber. The strange, vibrating energy coursed through the room, creating an almost hypnotic, swirling vortex. It was like standing in the eye of a cosmic storm. The team's panic was palpable, but Isaac stood frozen, staring at the phenomenon with an almost reverent awe. This is it, Isaac said quietly. We've done it. We've unlocked the catalyst. Elon's mind was in overdrive. The readings on the monitors were beyond anything they had expected. But worse, the physical environment was beginning to distort in real time. The pressure in the room was rising, and it felt as though the very laws of physics were being bent around them. What have we done? Elon muttered, taking a step back. He reached for his comm device. We need a team to shut this down now. Full emergency protocol. But as he spoke, the hum grew louder. The swirling vortex at the center of the room pulsed again, and suddenly, without warning, the entire chamber seemed to stretch out before them, and then shrink. Elon stumbled, disoriented by the shifting space around him. He could feel his body being stretched and compressed in ways that should have been impossible. The very air felt like it was bending, twisting. He grabbed hold of a nearby console to steady himself, but it was as though the room itself was no longer anchored in reality. Then, everything snapped back into place. The pressure vanished. The vortex blinked out of existence. The lights flickered back on, but the room was eerily still. The monitors that had been spiking wildly now showed only calm, neutral readings. Isaac slowly turned to Elon, his face a mask of shock and awe. "Did you feel that?" he whispered. Elon couldn't answer. He could only stare at the equipment in front of him, watching the steady pulse of data return to normal. But his mind was spinning. What had just happened? They hadn't just altered the laws of physics. They had felt them shift. Space, time, energy. They had all twisted and reformed in an instant. And yet, there was no physical damage. No explosion, no catastrophic failure. Everything was back to normal. Isaac's voice cut through the silence again, this time more insistent. "Elon, do you understand? We've done it. The catalyst, it's real. We've unlocked it. We've accessed a gateway, a rift in space-time itself." Elon shook his head, still trying to process. The boy was right. Something profound had occurred. They had opened a rift. But what did that mean for them? For the world? If this was truly the catalyst, they had just taken their first steps into a realm that no human was ever meant to access. "We need to analyze the data," Elon said, forcing himself to focus. "This isn't over. We're not out of danger. Not yet." Isaac didn't seem to hear him. He was already scribbling notes furiously on a whiteboard, his mind clearly racing faster than Elon could keep up. "We've just discovered something extraordinary," Isaac said, his voice trembling with excitement. "I need to understand it. I need to figure out how it works. If we can stabilize the rift—" "Stop," Elon said, his tone sharp. "We're not going any further until we know exactly what we've done. We could have just altered the fundamental structure of reality. We don't know the consequences of what we've triggered." Isaac hesitated. For a moment, Elon could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by the same relentless drive that had been burning in the boy since they had met. "Please, Elon," Isaac said, his voice quieter now, but still insistent. "This is what my mom was working on. This is what we've been trying to understand. If we can stabilize it, we could change everything. We could fix things. We could create things. Elon looked at Isaac, torn between his growing concern and the boy's obvious desperation. They were walking a razor's edge. If they pushed forward, they might be able to unlock the most revolutionary discovery in human history. But if they went too far, they could tear apart everything they knew: time, space, reality itself. "All right," Elon said, finally, his voice low. "But we do this carefully. We proceed cautiously. And if anything goes wrong, we shut it down. No exceptions." Isaac's eyes lit up with determination. Understood. As the team moved to analyze the data further, Elon stood in the center of the room, looking at the swirling patterns of light on the monitors. He could feel the weight of what they had just done, what they were about to do. The catalyst was real. But the question was no longer whether it would change the world. The question was, could they control it, or would it control them? The days following the first successful activation of the catalyst felt like a blur. The excitement and awe that Isaac and the team had felt in the moments after the rift had appeared slowly gave way to a more cautious atmosphere. Elon's mind raced constantly with the ramifications of what they had unlocked. Each time he thought about the rift, about the distortion of reality they had triggered, his sense of unease deepened. Isaac, on the other hand, had barely slept since the experiment. He was consumed by the data, unable to tear himself away from the glowing screens and shifting equations. It was as if the boy had entered another realm altogether, one where time no longer had the same hold over him. He spent hours at the chalkboard, drawing out new symbols, new equations, trying to understand the full scope of the catalyst's potential. Elon had attempted to keep a sense of control, but he could feel Isaac slipping away. It was clear that the young genius had become obsessed, not just with finishing his mother's work, but with pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Isaac no longer just wanted to understand the rift. He wanted to master it. One evening, Elon entered the lab to find Isaac standing before the central console, his fingers poised over the keys, eyes wide and unblinking. The familiar hum of the equipment filled the room, but there was something off. The energy readings were erratic again, flickering on the monitors as if someone, was pushing the system beyond its limits. "Isaac," Elon said, his voice steady but carrying a note of warning. "What's going on?" Isaac didn't answer at first. His eyes were fixed on the screen, his mind seemingly miles away. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft but filled with a strange excitement. "I found something. The catalyst. It's more than just an energy source. It's a bridge, Elon. A connection to other dimensions, other realities." Elon's pulse quickened. "Other dimensions?" "Isaac, we've talked about this. You don't know what you're dealing with." Isaac turned to him, his face lit with a feverish intensity. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with. This is bigger than we ever imagined. My mom knew it. She was close to something. I can feel it. If we push it further, if we stabilize the rift, we can reach other versions of reality, other versions of us." Elon felt a cold shiver run down his spine. "We need to shut it down. Right now. You're not thinking straight." Isaac shook his head, a quiet laugh escaping his lips. "You don't get it. This isn't about thinking straight anymore. This is about understanding the infinite. If we can access other realities, we can change things, fix things. Imagine a world where we didn't make the mistakes we made. Where we didn't." Isaac's voice faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "Where we didn't lose my mom." Elon's heart tightened. He understood the boy's pain. Isaac's mother had been the guiding light in his life, the one who had set him on this path. Losing her had left a hole, and Isaac had been searching for something, anything, to fill it. But this obsession with the catalyst, with the idea of accessing other realities, was dangerous. "We can't play God, Isaac," Elon said, his voice firm but gentle. This isn't a game. We're talking about breaking the very laws of the universe. We don't know what might happen if we try to manipulate that much power." But Isaac wasn't listening. His eyes were wide, unblinking, as if he had already crossed into a place where Elon couldn't follow. "I need to finish this," Isaac said, his voice trembling now. "I need to understand what happened to her. And if I can see another reality where she didn't disappear, Maybe I can bring her back. I have to try. Elon's mind raced. He understood the desperation in Isaac's words, the unbearable grief of losing a parent. But this was no longer just about Isaac's mother. The forces they were dealing with were incomprehensible. They were venturing into realms that no one had ever imagined. We need to step back, Elon insisted. Take a break. Think this through. We don't know the full consequences yet. We have to be careful. Isaac's gaze hardened. You're afraid? Elon was taken aback. Afraid? Isaac stepped closer, his voice rising. You're afraid of what we might find. Afraid of what I might do. You're afraid because you know that once we open that door, there's no going back. You're afraid of the unknown. Elon felt a pang of guilt, but he knew that wasn't the issue. It wasn't about fear. It was about control. And right now, Isaac was losing his grip on it. I'm not afraid, Isaac, Elon said slowly, but I'm not reckless either. You can't risk everything just to satisfy your curiosity. If we unleash something we can't control, Isaac interrupted him with a sudden, wild laugh. Control? You think we can control this? The universe itself is a chaotic, unpredictable place, and we've found a way to tap into it. We can be more than just human, Elon. We can become gods. Elon's stomach churned. Isaac's words had a strange, hypnotic quality. The boy was no longer the same curious, determined prodigy that Elon had come to admire. He was consumed by something darker, more dangerous than any of them had anticipated. Before Elon could respond, the lights in the lab flickered again, and the air grew cold. The hum from the equipment shifted, becoming more erratic. Suddenly, the room seemed to ripple, just like it had during the first test, but this time it was stronger, more forceful. Isaac didn't notice. He was already at the console again, his fingers flying over the keys. We're so close, Isaac murmured. Just one more adjustment, just one more step, and we'll be able to reach the other side. We'll understand everything. Elon's heart pounded. Isaac, no. But it was too late. The rift in space-time flared to life again, this time with a fury that shook the entire building. The walls trembled, and the ground beneath their feet felt as though it were moving, shifting, warping. The monitors went wild, flashing with incomprehensible data, and the pressure in the room grew unbearable. Isaac's face lit up with exhilaration. It's working, Elon. Then, in the blink of an eye, everything stopped. The lights went out again, the hum vanished, and the room plunged into darkness. But it wasn't just the lab that was dark. The world outside, the whole universe, seemed to fall silent, as though everything had stopped moving. Elon stood frozen, trying to steady his breathing, his mind racing. The air felt different now, heavier. There was a sense of wrongness, as if they had crossed a line from which there was no return. Isaac, Elon whispered, his voice thick with dread. What have we done? The world remained still. It was as if time itself had stopped. Elon stood in the center of the room, his heart thumping in his chest as the silence pressed in around him. The strange, oppressive atmosphere that had taken hold of the lab felt like a thick fog, impossible to escape. It was as if they had crossed a threshold and were now suspended in some sort of limbo, a place where the laws of physics no longer held sway. Isaac, however, seemed oblivious to the growing unease. His eyes were wide with excitement, his body practically vibrating with anticipation. He had his hands on the console, tapping away frantically as if nothing had changed. But Elon could sense the shift in the air, the pulse of the rift in space-time, the subtle hum beneath the surface. I think we've done it, Isaac muttered, a manic gleam in his eyes. We've connected to the other side. Elon took a step back, his mind racing. The data on the screens had gone haywire. Numbers flashed and disappeared as quickly as they appeared. But there was something else, something darker. Isaac, Elon said, his voice sharp. Shut it down. Now. Isaac didn't respond. His hands moved even faster, typing commands that Elon couldn't follow. The energy readings on the monitors were spiking out of control now, more erratic, more chaotic. The hum in the room was growing louder, and the space around them seemed to warp, bending in strange, unsettling patterns. The air was thick with tension. The rift was still active, and something was trying to break through. But what? Elon's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer to the console, his mind struggling to make sense of what was happening. The readings, those weren't just fluctuations in energy. The data was changing. It was as though the numbers themselves were being distorted, bending and twisting in unnatural ways. And the deeper Elon looked, the more he realized that the fabric of reality itself was unraveling. The ground beneath their feet trembled once more, this time harder. The walls of the lab creaked and groaned as if they were being pulled apart. The lights flickered again, their steady glow faltering like a dying ember. Elon, Isaac's voice was distant, almost detached. We can't stop now. We're on the verge of something huge. I can feel it. Elon, I'm warning you, Elon growled, a hint of panic in his voice. He reached for the control panel to shut down the experiment, but Isaac swatted his hand away. No, Isaac shouted, his face twisted in frustration. You don't understand. This is bigger than both of us. We have to keep going. We've only scratched the surface. The rift flared again, brighter this time, sending a shockwave through the room. The air was charged, crackling with raw energy. Elon stumbled back as the very air around them seemed to pulse with life, the temperature dropping dramatically. It felt like standing at the edge of a precipice, staring down into an abyss. Then, the hum intensified, and the world shifted. It wasn't like before, where the space around them had simply warped. This was different. The very laws of physics, of time and space, seemed to tear open, allowing something to seep through. Something alive. The walls were no longer solid. The lights were now flickering in erratic patterns, their brightness ebbing in waves. The floor beneath them seemed to ripple like water. Elon could see shadowy figures flickering in the corner of his vision, like ghosts caught between dimensions. Isaac, Elon gasped, his voice trembling. Do you see that? What's happening? Isaac, lost in his frenzy, didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the center of the lab, where the rift remained open, swirling with chaotic energy. And then, without warning, a sound echoed through the lab, deep, resonant, and otherworldly. It was like a thunderclap that reverberated through the very bones of the building. Isaac finally turned to Elon, his face pale, his excitement evaporating. For the first time, the boy looked truly scared. Elon, he whispered, I think we've made a mistake. Before Elon could respond, the shadows at the edge of the room seemed to shift again. This time, they didn't fade. They came closer. And then they stepped forward. A figure emerged from the rift. Its outline was hazy, shifting, like a mirage that couldn't decide if it was real or not. The figure flickered between forms, humanoid, but its features were indiscernible. It was as if the being couldn't decide what it wanted to look like, so it kept changing, an ever-shifting mass of light and shadow. Elon's breath caught in his throat. What the hell is that? He whispered, more to himself than to Isaac. Isaac's face had drained of color. It's a manifestation, he stammered. We've opened a door, and it's letting something through. The figure stepped forward again, and Elon felt his skin crawl. It was as if the room had grown colder, impossibly cold. The temperature was dropping at an exponential rate, and the air was thick with an unnatural weight. Every instinct in his body screamed to run, to get out. But he couldn't move. Not when the figure turned its head toward them. The thing didn't have a face, at least not in the way that a human would. Instead, there were just deep, endless voids where its eyes should have been. But from those voids came a sense of knowing, an understanding of things too vast for human comprehension. It wasn't looking at them, it was understanding them. Isaac's voice trembled. We have to close it. We have to close the rift now? Elon nodded, moving swiftly toward the console, but his fingers seemed to fumble. The controls weren't responding. The system was no longer under their control. The energy readings on the monitors had completely flatlined, but that wasn't the worst part. The rift was widening, slowly but surely. The figures, no, the beings, were beginning to pour through. The ground beneath their feet groaned again, and the walls of the room seemed to bend inwards. The distortion wasn't just around the rift anymore. It was everywhere. Reality itself was beginning to break down. "What are we dealing with, Isaac?" Elon shouted, panic rising in his chest. "What are they?" Isaac was silent for a moment, his eyes still fixed on the shadowy figure in front of them. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know," Isaac said, his voice filled with dread. "But they're not from this world, and they don't belong here." The figure flickered again, stepping closer. Elon could feel the air crackle with unnatural energy. The shadows around them were alive now, swirling with an eerie sense of purpose. "Isaac!" Elon shouted, desperation seeping into his voice. "We have to stop it now. Shut the system down. Now." But Isaac didn't move. His eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. "It's too late, Elon," he whispered. "It's already started." The room shuddered violently, and the figure reached out, its shadowy tendrils stretching toward them. And then, as if the universe itself had broken, everything went black. When Elon opened his eyes, he was no longer in the lab. At first, he thought he was dreaming. His senses were overwhelmed with an eerie calmness, an unnatural stillness. The faint sound of his breathing was the only thing that cut through the thick silence. He blinked, trying to orient himself, but the world around him was completely unrecognizable. He was no longer standing on the cold concrete floor of the lab. Now, he was somewhere else. The ground beneath him wasn't solid but seemed to ripple with each step, like liquid frozen in time. Above him, the sky was a swirling mass of dark clouds that seemed to move in patterns that defied logic, an endless loop of impossible shapes and colors. The horizon was jagged and fractured, as if it had been shattered into 1,000 pieces. Elon tried to stand up, but his legs felt weak, as though gravity itself didn't quite work the same way here. He reached out, but his hands passed through the air as if it were smoke. No resistance. His mind struggled to comprehend what he was seeing, what he was feeling. Nothing about this place was real, at least, not in the way he understood reality. Where was Isaac? "Isaac!" Elon shouted, his voice ringing out, but it was swallowed by the emptiness. No response. He tried again, this time with more urgency. "Isaac!" His voice was louder now, more desperate. He had to find him. But the silence, the suffocating silence, continued. The weight of it pressed against his chest, heavy and relentless. He turned, scanning the empty void around him. Nothing but endless, swirling clouds and fractured landscapes. It was as if he had been dropped into a place where time and space had lost all meaning. Then, a faint flicker in the distance caught his eye. He squinted into the darkness, his heart beating faster. It wasn't much, just a brief flash, like a light in the distance, but it was enough. It had to be Isaac. "Isaac!" Elon called again, his voice barely more than a whisper. The flicker grew stronger, brighter, and in that moment, Elon knew what he had to do. He pushed forward, stumbling over the unstable ground, every step feeling like an eternity. As he drew closer, the flicker took on more substance. He could now make out the shape of a figure. No, a person, standing alone in the middle of the swirling chaos. It was Isaac. His face was twisted with a mixture of confusion and fear, but there was something else, something that Elon couldn't quite place. It was as if Isaac wasn't fully aware of where he was, or perhaps he wasn't fully present at all. "Isaac!" Elon shouted again, his voice trembling with relief. "You're alive. Thank God." Isaac turned slowly, his eyes widening when he saw Elon. But instead of relief, there was something in his gaze that Elon had never seen before. Something cold, distant, almost alien. Isaac's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. His mouth moved, but there was no sound, just the soft hum of the strange environment around them. "Elon, don't," Isaac's voice finally emerged, but it was a whisper, a distortion of reality itself. "It's too late. We've opened something we can't control." "What do you mean?" Elon said, stepping forward. "Isaac, we have to get out of here. This place, it's not real. We can't stay here. It's a nightmare." Isaac shook his head, his expression haunted. "This is no nightmare. This is This is the result of everything we've done. We've torn open the fabric of reality. And now, he trailed off, as if the words themselves were too much to bear. Now what, Isaac? What's happening? Elon urged, desperate for answers. His mind was racing. What had they done? What had they unleashed? Isaac's eyes grew distant again, unfocused. It was as if he were staring at something just out of reach, something beyond Elon's comprehension. This isn't just about us anymore, Isaac whispered. It's about everything. The rift, it didn't just let something in, it let everything in. All the versions of reality are bleeding into each other. And now we're in the middle of it. Elon's stomach sank. The implications of Isaac's words were far worse than anything he had imagined. The rift hadn't just torn apart the space around them. It had fractured the very fabric of reality itself. The boundaries between different versions of their world were collapsing. The barriers between parallel universes were dissolving. In a flash, Elon understood. They had opened a door to a multiverse, one that was never meant to be accessed. And now, that door was wide open. What do we do? Elon asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't know if Isaac had even heard him, but he needed to hear it from him. He needed Isaac to tell him that there was still a way out, that they hadn't completely doomed everything. Isaac didn't respond at first. He stood there, silent, eyes wide and lost. Then, his expression shifted, as if something within him had finally clicked. He met Elon's gaze, and for the first time since the rift had opened, there was clarity in his eyes. It's not just us, Isaac said, his voice stronger now. There are others who have crossed over from other realities, and they're not friendly. They're trying to take this world. We're standing at the intersection of 1,000 different realities, and every single one of them wants to destroy this one, to replace it. Elon's blood ran cold. What do we do, Isaac? How do we stop this? Isaac looked around, his face grim. We have to shut it down, but we can't just close the rift. We have to seal it, lock it completely. If we don't, everything we've seen, everything we've unleashed, will consume this reality. It will become theirs. A sudden, high-pitched screech filled the air, followed by a low, guttural growl. Elon turned toward the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. Shadows flickered in the distance, dark shapes moving, creeping toward them. They're here, Isaac whispered, a cold sweat forming on his brow. The others. They found us. Elon didn't need any more explanation. He turned to the rift, the swirling chaos of energy that had once been their greatest achievement, now their most dangerous mistake. He had no idea how to seal it, but Isaac had been right. This was the only way. The rift had to be closed. He stepped forward, ready to do whatever it took. Isaac followed him, his face a mixture of determination and fear. But before they could move any further, the ground beneath their feet shifted again. The air crackled with energy, and a figure materialized before them, tall, dark, and humanoid, but with features that seemed wrong. It was the same figure Elon had seen before when the rift first opened, but now it was more than just a shadow. It had form, substance, purpose, and it was moving toward them, its presence filling the air with a suffocating pressure. Isaac stood frozen, his mouth moving, but no words came. Elon knew there was only one thing to do now. The rift had to be sealed, and to do that, they would have to fight back the darkness that was pouring through it. The figure loomed before them, its shadow stretching long across the fractured ground. Elon's pulse raced as his mind scrambled to make sense of what was happening. It had taken form, an entity birthed from the rift, something that shouldn't exist in their world. The sheer weight of its presence made the air feel thick, charged with a force that pressed down on him from every direction. Isaac stood beside him, motionless, eyes wide with a terror Elon had never seen before. The young genius's lips trembled, but he didn't speak. He didn't need to. The terror in his eyes said it all. This wasn't just a figure. This wasn't just a manifestation of the rift. This was a being from another world, another reality, and it was here for one purpose: to take theirs. Elon's instincts screamed at him to run, get out, escape. But there was nowhere to go. The air was thick with a kind of presence that stifled movement, like the whole world had conspired to trap them here. The figure stepped forward, its long, slender limbs twisting and contorting unnaturally with every movement. As it came closer, Elon could see the details more clearly. The way its skin seemed to shimmer and flicker, like it was made of fractured glass, each piece caught in a constant state of flux. Its face, or what passed for a face, was nothing more than an endless void, dark and infinite, as though it were staring into the deepest part of his soul. Elon could feel its gaze on him, a weight that pressed in on him from all sides. It was as though the figure didn't just see him, it understood him. It knew his every fear, his every weakness, his every thought, and it was waiting for the moment when he would break. "Isaac," Elon said through gritted teeth, barely able to form the words. "We need to shut the rift. Now, do you have any idea how?" Isaac didn't answer right away. He was too transfixed by the figure, frozen in place. His eyes darted around the swirling chaos, as if he were looking for an escape, but there was none. The rift was widening with each passing second, and the shadows of more figures were appearing. Others like this one, more flickering forms emerging from the abyss, each one more distorted and grotesque than the last. Elon grabbed Isaac by the shoulders, forcing him to look at him. "Isaac," he shouted, "focus. We have to close the rift before it's too late." Isaac's eyes snapped to his, but they were filled with confusion, as though he were struggling to understand the reality of the situation. I don't know how," Isaac muttered, his voice shaky. "The rift, it's beyond us now. We can't control it. We've opened something we can't close." Elon shook him harder. "You're the one who opened it, Isaac. You have to know how to close it. You have to." The entity before them stirred, its body rippling as if the air around it was made of liquid. The ground trembled under their feet, and the world seemed to distort again. The sky above them darkened, and the wind began to howl like 1,000 voices whispering in a language that Elon couldn't understand. But one thing was clear. The figure was moving toward them, its form twisting and contorting with every step. "Isaac!" Elon shouted again, his voice now full of desperation. "Do something." Isaac's hand shot out, as though drawn by some invisible force. His fingers hovered above the console that had appeared in the middle of the void, an eerie, glowing interface that pulsed with energy, waiting for his command. For a moment, Elon thought Isaac might try to shut it all down. But instead, Isaac's face twisted with a strange, agonizing look, like he was struggling with something deep inside himself. "Elon," Isaac whispered, his voice cracking. I can't. It's already too far gone. We've crossed a threshold that can't be undone." The figure drew closer. Elon's heart pounded, the sound of it deafening in his ears. They were running out of time. His eyes darted around, but all he could see were shadows. Figures, countless figures, stepping through the rift. Dark shapes that were starting to emerge from every corner of the fractured world. Every one of them was a threat, a being that didn't belong here. He felt the pull of the rift, the gravity of the void itself, drawing him in. It was as if the rift was alive and hungry, and the universe itself was bending to its will. There was no escape. But then, something within him snapped. Elon Musk wasn't the kind of person to surrender, to let an impossible situation dictate the outcome. He'd spent his entire life defying the odds, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. And now wasn't the time to stop. With a deep breath, he pushed Isaac aside, ignoring the boy's protests. "Move," Elon barked, his voice firm with authority. He had no plan, no strategy. But one thing was clear. He had to act. They had to close the rift, or they would lose everything. Elon sprinted toward the rift's center, his body moving on instinct. As he approached, the temperature dropped drastically, and the air thickened, like moving through water. But he didn't stop. He reached the glowing interface, his fingers trembling as they hovered over the controls. He scanned the patterns, the interface displaying strings of numbers and symbols that seemed to make no sense. Suddenly, the figure lunged forward. Its form became solid, its body crashing against the air like a tidal wave. Elon could feel its presence growing stronger, the force of it pushing him back, like a vacuum that sucked the very breath from his lungs. But Elon refused to give in. He slammed his hand onto the console, his fingers stabbing at the nearest button. He didn't know what it would do, but at this point, he was willing to take any risk. The console lit up, and a burst of energy shot through him. The world around him began to distort, the shadows warping into long, dark tendrils. The temperature plummeted further, and the hum of the rift grew louder, deafening, as if the rift itself were screaming. Elon fought against the pressure, pressing harder, the lights flashing erratically. A screen blinked to life in front of him, and a single word appeared: initiating lockdown. But before Elon could process what that meant, a scream, inhuman and agonizing, ripped through the air. The figure before them let out a shriek, its entire form twisting violently. The shadows around them began to collapse in on themselves, swirling with increasing speed. The air crackled with electricity, and the very ground beneath them seemed to fracture. "Isaac!" Elon shouted. "Get ready to run. We're about to lose control." Isaac's eyes widened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a spark of determination in his eyes. Without another word, he turned and ran, his feet scrambling over the unstable ground as he followed Elon. But just as they reached the edge of the rift, something terrible happened. The world shook. The rift exploded. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The explosion was deafening. It wasn't a single burst of sound but a cacophony, a violent rush of energy that seemed to tear through the very fabric of reality itself. For a brief moment, Elon felt as if he were suspended in time, frozen in a state of impossible silence before everything shattered at once. The ground beneath them cracked open, as if the universe itself were breaking apart. Waves of force rippled outward, sending shockwaves through the air. The sky, once a swirling mass of colors, now distorted into jagged lines of light, splitting and folding into itself. The world around them seemed to implode, the landscape twisting in on itself as though caught in a whirlpool. Elon's body was thrown backward, his vision spinning as he was lifted off the ground. He felt himself tumbling through space, caught in the wake of an immense force that stretched time and space like rubber. It was as though he were trapped inside a collapsing star, caught between realities. Then, everything stopped. For a brief instant, there was nothing but darkness, silence, nothingness. And then Elon crashed to the ground, his body slamming into something solid with a sickening thud. Pain shot through his side, but it barely registered. He lay there, disoriented, trying to push himself up, but his arms felt like lead. His heart was pounding, and his breath came in gasps as he struggled to understand what had just happened. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear the blurriness from his vision, and when his surroundings came into focus, he realized something horrifying. He wasn't in the void anymore. The landscape had changed. The fractured, shifting world was gone, replaced by a strange, alien place, one that felt both familiar and utterly foreign at the same time. He was standing in the middle of a forest. But it wasn't just any forest. The trees were impossibly tall, their trunks twisted and gnarled, their branches stretching out like fingers toward the sky. The air was thick with mist, and the ground was soft beneath his feet, covered in moss and strange, bioluminescent plants that flickered with a faint glow. The sky above them was dim, an eerie pale hue that seemed to pulse with a strange, unnatural light. Elon could feel the weight of something else, something watching them, but the world was silent. The usual sounds of wildlife, birds chirping, insects buzzing, were absent. The only sound was the rush of his own breathing. He pushed himself up to his feet, his legs shaky, and looked around. Isaac was beside him, sprawled on the ground, looking equally stunned and disoriented. His eyes were wide with disbelief, his breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. "Isaac," Elon called, his voice hoarse. "Isaac, are you okay?" Isaac slowly sat up, his eyes darting around as if he was trying to make sense of the new environment. His face was pale, his expression one of deep confusion. "Where are we?" he muttered, his voice distant. "What happened to the rift? It was supposed to shut down. We were supposed to close it." "I thought we did," Elon said, his voice thick with anxiety. "But I don't think we did. Not completely." Isaac shook his head, his fingers twitching as if he were on the verge of breaking down. "This doesn't make sense. The rift, it was supposed to reset everything. If we broke the barriers, then why are we here?" Elon stared around at the dark forest, his mind racing. The air was thick with tension, and his instincts were screaming at him to leave, to run. But there was no escape. The rift had taken them to another place, another reality, and the rules of this world were not the same as their own. "Isaac," Elon said, his voice steady but urgent, "we're not just in another world. This place, it feels wrong. Like we're not supposed to be here." Isaac looked up, his eyes focusing as though trying to process the gravity of the situation. The rift didn't just tear open a single reality. It opened multiple realities. Every possibility is bleeding into each other. And now, we're in one of them. Elon swallowed hard, feeling a sense of dread creeping up his spine. "How do we fix it?" he asked. He needed an answer, something that would allow them to take control of this situation. Isaac didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared into the mist, his brow furrowed in thought. "We don't know where we are. We don't even know if this is real." The words hit Elon harder than he expected. What if they weren't real? What if this wasn't just another dimension, but something even stranger? A dream? A hallucination? Suddenly, a loud crack sounded in the distance. Elon spun toward the sound, instinctively moving to protect Isaac. But the forest remained eerily still, its towering trees silent as if holding their breath. And then he saw it. A figure stepped out of the mist, tall and shadowed, its features hidden by the darkness. Elon's heart stopped in his chest as the figure moved closer, a sinister energy radiating from it. This wasn't one of the entities from the rift. No, this was something different, something that belonged to this world. Elon grabbed Isaac's arm, pulling him to his feet. "We need to move. Now." But Isaac didn't react. His gaze was locked on the figure, his expression one of cold horror. He knew what it was, or at least, he had some idea. And it was worse than anything they had encountered so far. "Elon, run," Isaac whispered, his voice trembling. "Run and don't look back." Before Elon could react, Isaac pushed him away, stepping forward as if to face the approaching figure. Elon stumbled back, confusion and fear flooding his thoughts. "I said run." Isaac's voice cracked with a desperate urgency. Elon hesitated for a moment, his instincts torn between his loyalty to Isaac and the overwhelming sense of danger closing in around them. But in the end, it was the fear, the gut-deep instinct to survive, that won out. He turned, bolting into the dense forest, ignoring the branches that whipped at his face as he ran. Behind him, Isaac's silhouette flickered briefly before disappearing into the mist. And then, just as Elon thought he was free, the world trembled again. The ground beneath his feet cracked and shifted, and the air grew thick with static electricity. He didn't look back. He couldn't. But in the distance, he heard the sounds of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, inescapable. They were being hunted. Elon's breath came in ragged gasps as he pushed through the dense underbrush, his legs aching with each step. The world around him was shifting, blurring in and out of focus, as though the very fabric of reality itself were warping. The trees seemed to pulse, their twisted branches reaching out like fingers, eager to ensnare him. The eerie silence of the forest had returned, broken only by the pounding of his own heart and the distant, rhythmic thudding of something following him. Something was coming. He dared not look back, but every instinct screamed at him to keep moving, to put as much distance between himself and whatever pursued him. He stumbled through the undergrowth, his shoes slipping on the damp earth, the air thick with moisture and an unnatural chill. The mist that enveloped the forest was stifling, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. The sound of footsteps grew louder. "It's close." Elon's mind raced. The rift had torn apart everything, Not just the fabric of space and time, but something deeper, something he couldn't quite comprehend. Isaac had known something about this place, the other reality, but had said nothing more before pushing him away. Why had Isaac done that? Was he protecting him? Or had Isaac been hiding something else, something Elon wasn't ready to face? He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the here and now. The sound of the footsteps was closer now, too close. His pulse quickened, and his feet moved faster, his body propelled by sheer survival instinct. He'd been in dangerous situations before, had stared down death more times than he could count. But this was different. This felt like a hunt. As the mist swirled, he caught a glimpse of movement, just a flicker in his peripheral vision. He wasn't alone. Something was watching him. Suddenly, the air crackled with energy, and a surge of electricity shot through the ground beneath him. Elon staggered, nearly losing his balance, but he kept moving forward. A strange hum filled the air, like the buzzing of thousands of unseen voices, all calling out at once. The hum grew louder, and Elon's senses were overwhelmed by its intensity. A flash of motion. A shadow darted between the trees. Without thinking, Elon veered left, breaking through a dense thicket of vines and thick underbrush. He wasn't sure where he was going, just away from the sound, away from the presence that stalked him. The forest around him had begun to twist, the trees bending at impossible angles, their trunks spiraling upward into an endless, dark sky. The path ahead seemed to be collapsing, the ground beneath him shifting as if the earth itself were giving way to some unseen force. Then, he saw it. A clearing ahead, bathed in an eerie light, surrounded by trees that seemed to glow with an unnatural energy. At the center of the clearing, a stone altar stood, half covered in moss and vines, its surface marked with strange symbols that Elon couldn't recognize. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd expect to find in a place like this, more like something out of a dream or a nightmare. But there was no time to wonder about its purpose. Something was coming, and Elon had to make a choice. He darted toward the altar, hoping to find something that could help him. Anything. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but the feeling of being pursued was too overwhelming to ignore. As he reached the altar, he spotted something that made his blood run cold. At the base of the stone, a small crack appeared to be glowing faintly, as if beckoning him to approach. Elon knelt down, brushing the moss away to get a better look. His fingers traced the crack, and suddenly, a shockwave of energy burst from the altar, sending him flying back. He landed hard on the ground, gasping for air as the force of the explosion knocked the wind out of him. But as he regained his bearings, something had changed. The world around him seemed to shimmer and fade, like the illusion of a dream. The figure was standing there. It wasn't the same one from earlier. This was different. Its silhouette was cloaked in shadow, but its presence was unmistakable. It was taller than any human, its form stretched and warped in ways that defied the natural laws of reality. Its eyes, or what passed for eyes, glowed an unnatural, sickly yellow, and it exuded an aura of malevolence that sent a chill down Elon's spine. The figure moved toward him, its steps slow and deliberate, each one causing the ground to tremble. Elon instinctively pushed himself backward, scrambling to get to his feet, but his legs felt weak, and his movements were sluggish. His mind raced. He had no weapon, no way to defend himself, not here, not in this reality. And then, it spoke. "You shouldn't have come here." The voice was deep, resonant, like the echo of an ancient, forgotten language. It was both in his ears and in his mind, reverberating through his very soul. Elon felt it clawing at his consciousness, invasive and suffocating. "I am the guardian of this realm," the figure continued, "and you are not welcome here." Elon's mind raced for a response, but his words caught in his throat. The figure's presence was overpowering, its energy so dense that it felt like the air itself was thickening, closing in around him. I don't know what you want from me," Elon managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. The figure stopped moving, its head tilting slightly, as though considering him. "I have no interest in you," it said, its voice softening, almost amused. "You are just a product of the rift, a fleeting moment in time. But that boy, he is something else. He is a part of me. And you have brought him here. Elon's stomach churned. Isaac. This had something to do with Isaac. Elon Musk. The figure spoke his name with a chilling familiarity. You think you can play with forces you don't understand, but there is no escaping the consequences of your actions. The boy will choose his path, and it will decide the fate of everything. The ground beneath Elon's feet rumbled as the figure's form began to flicker, its edges distorting like a hologram. It wasn't just an entity from this reality. It was tied to the very fabric of this world. The rift is closed, it said, but you haven't seen the worst of what it's done. The lines are blurred now. You cannot undo what has been done. A cold wave of dread washed over Elon as the figure raised its hand, the world around him seeming to ripple in response. Then, in an instant, the figure was gone, vanishing into the air, leaving behind nothing but the eerie silence of the forest. But something had changed. The sense of foreboding that had gripped Elon's heart only intensified. The hunt was far from over, and now, the clock was ticking down to something much worse than just their survival. Isaac was no longer just a pawn in this game. He was the key. Elon was still breathing heavily, his mind struggling to keep up with the events that had unfolded. The Guardian had vanished into the mists, leaving behind nothing but an oppressive silence that seemed to suffocate the air. His hands were trembling, his heart pounding, but one thing was certain now. Isaac wasn't just a bystander in this world. He was central to everything. The key to understanding the rift, the portal, and the twisted reality they found themselves trapped in. And Elon had no idea how to protect him. Isaac had known more than he'd let on. He'd been hiding something important. Elon hadn't fully realized the gravity of the situation until now, when faced with the impossibility of their circumstances. The rift had torn open the barriers between dimensions, and Isaac was somehow the focal point of this chaos. Elon took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. The forest was still, eerily so. The distant hum of the energy that had enveloped the place seemed to be fading, but the weight of the figure's words still hung in the air. The boy will choose his path, the Guardian had said, and it will decide the fate of everything. The fate of everything. That was the kind of statement that could drive a person mad. But Elon Musk wasn't a man who gave up easily. His mind raced, formulating a plan. Or at least, trying to. The altar. There had been something about that altar, hadn't there? A small crack, glowing faintly, almost inviting him to interact with it. He didn't understand its significance, but he needed to get back to it. Maybe it held some kind of clue. A way out. Or a way to stop whatever this world was becoming. Without wasting another moment, Elon turned toward the altar, determined to get closer, to make sense of whatever was happening. But before he could take a step, a cold voice echoed through the mist. "You're not going anywhere." Elon froze. His blood ran cold. He turned slowly, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was Isaac. But something was wrong. The boy's once pale face was now drawn with an unsettling expression. Cold, detached, almost as if he were someone else entirely. His eyes, once filled with fear and uncertainty, were now blank, like two black voids staring into the abyss. Isaac's voice was different, too. It wasn't the quiver of a scared teenager. It was deeper, more resonant, and it carried an eerie calm. "I know what you're thinking," Isaac said, his voice sending chills down Elon's spine. "But it's too late. You can't undo what's been done. You can't stop the rift." Elon's throat tightened. This wasn't Isaac. Not completely. The boy was here physically, but that voice, that presence, it was something else, something darker. "Isaac?" Elon asked, his voice tight with confusion. "What happened? What's going on?" Isaac, or whatever this was, tilted his head slightly, the motion almost mechanical. "I am no longer the boy you knew." The words reverberated in the air, sending a sharp pain through Elon's skull. "The rift has changed me. I am part of it now. I am connected to the very essence of this reality." Elon's mind reeled. This didn't make sense. Isaac couldn't be changed. He couldn't be consumed by the rift. There had to be a way to reach him, to bring the boy back. No, Elon said, stepping forward, his voice filled with determination. No, Isaac, you're still in there. I know you are. You have to be. We can fix this. We can. You don't understand. Isaac's voice interrupted him, and for a brief moment, Elon thought he saw a flicker of something human in the boy's eyes. A flash of fear, maybe, or recognition. But it was gone in an instant. This isn't something you can fix. The rift is a force that cannot be controlled. I can't stop it. I can't stop myself. Elon's mind raced. The rift had changed Isaac. It had transformed him, somehow linked him to the very fabric of this twisted dimension. If Isaac was the key, as the Guardian had said, then whatever path Isaac chose would determine the fate of this entire world. And that meant Elon had only one option. He had to find a way to reach Isaac, before the boy made a choice that would destroy everything. Isaac, Elon said, his voice softer now, trying to break through the wall that had formed between them. I know you can hear me. Listen to me. You're not alone in this. I won't leave you here. You don't have to do this. Isaac's expression remained impassive, but something in his eyes shifted. For the briefest moment, Elon saw the boy he knew, the frightened, brilliant Isaac who had been fighting for control. But it was fleeting, gone before Elon could even grasp it. You don't understand what you're asking of me, Isaac whispered, his voice barely audible. I can't fight this. It's in me now. It's too powerful. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble again, and a low, guttural sound echoed through the air, like a distant, rumbling growl. The mist swirled around them, thickening, as though it were alive, reacting to the boy's words. Isaac, listen to me, Elon shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. I know you feel like you're losing control, but I'm right here. I won't give up on you. You don't have to choose this path. You have the power to fight it. We can fight it together. Isaac's eyes flickered again, but this time, they lingered on Elon, and for a moment, the cold, alien expression on his face softened. You can't stop what's already begun. The rumble grew louder, and the air thickened with pressure. A sudden pulse of energy shot through the ground, knocking Elon to the ground. The world around him shook violently as a dark energy began to spread, coursing through the trees, the earth, the very air. He pushed himself to his feet, his heart racing. You're wrong, Isaac, Elon shouted. It's not too late. I won't let you go down this road. We're stronger than this. And then, the worst possible thing happened. The ground split open, and a massive rift of energy tore through the air in front of Isaac. The energy was swirling with all the colors of the chaos they had witnessed, dark blues, blood reds, sickly greens, mixing together in a vortex of raw power. Elon knew, without a doubt, that this was the true face of the rift, the thing that had begun to consume Isaac, and now it was going to consume them all. But Isaac stood there, motionless, his hands outstretched toward the rift. The boy had made his choice, and in that moment, Elon knew there was no turning back. The rift roared in front of Isaac, a gaping maw of energy, its tendrils stretching like a beast eager to devour everything in its path. The air vibrated with a frequency that Elon could feel deep in his bones, as if the very fabric of reality was tearing itself apart at the seams. Isaac's hand hovered in the swirling energy, his face expressionless, as though he were surrendering to something far greater than himself. Elon's pulse raced. The sight of Isaac standing there, arms extended toward the rift, was one of the most terrifying things he had ever witnessed. It wasn't just the physical destruction that was about to occur. It was what Isaac had become. The boy he had known was slipping away, swallowed by the very force they had tried to control. Isaac, no, Elon shouted, desperation ringing in his voice. His feet were already moving, instinctively closing the distance between them. You don't have to do this. Isaac didn't respond. His face was still, frozen in a state of eerie calm, as if he were lost to everything around him. Elon reached out, his hand trembling as he grasped Isaac's wrist, trying to pull him away from the rift. But Isaac didn't budge. Instead, he turned slowly, his eyes locking with Elon's. They were no longer the warm, familiar eyes of the boy Elon had fought beside. They were cold, dark voids, pools of abyssal blackness that seemed to swallow everything in their gaze. "It's too late, Elon," Isaac said softly, his voice almost unrecognizable. "The rift is a part of me now. I don't have a choice." Elon shook his head, his heart sinking into his chest. "Yes, you do. You always have a choice. Don't let this thing control you." The world around them seemed to grow heavier. The trees trembled, their gnarled branches creaking as the rift's energy twisted and stretched. Elon felt a sharp pull toward the energy field, a force far greater than his willpower fighting against him, trying to drag him in. "Please," Elon whispered, his voice cracking. "Fight it. You're stronger than this. You've always been stronger." For a fleeting moment, Isaac's eyes flickered again. Elon could have sworn he saw a flash of the boy he once knew. The Isaac who laughed at his jokes, the Isaac who dreamed of a future beyond the rift. But it was gone in the blink of an eye. Isaac's hand moved, and a pulse of dark energy shot out from the rift, slamming into Elon's chest. He was thrown backward, his body crashing into the ground with brutal force. Stars exploded in his vision as the air left his lungs. For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't think. Every muscle in his body screamed in pain. But then, something inside him snapped. He couldn't let this happen. Not to Isaac, not to the world. He wasn't going to give up. Elon pushed himself to his feet, his hands shaking but determined. His gaze locked onto Isaac, whose body was now emanating a dark aura, his face shrouded in shadow, consumed by the rift's energy. The boy was still there. Elon could feel it. "I won't lose you, Isaac," Elon shouted, his voice raw with emotion. Without thinking, he ran toward the rift, his every step dragging him deeper into the storm of energy. The rift pulled at him, a sickening gravity that seemed to hold him in place, but he pushed through, desperation giving him strength. And then, he reached out to Isaac. "Isaac, listen to me." Elon grunted, his fingers brushing against the boy's arm. The touch seemed to trigger something. Isaac flinched, his body jerking as if the touch had broken through the rift's control, just for a second. "Elon," Isaac's voice cracked, like a whisper from a distant memory. "It's too late." "No, it's not," Elon said firmly, his grip tightening. "You can still fight. You can still be the person you were. Don't let it take you. Don't let this thing consume you." Isaac's eyes widened. The blackness that had swallowed him seemed to flicker, like a dying star struggling to hold on to its last vestiges of light. But then, the rift's pulse grew stronger, its energy forcing Isaac's arms upward, pulling him back into the storm. "Elon," Isaac whispered again, the faintest hint of fear in his voice. His body trembled, caught between two forces, the energy of the rift and his own human will. Elon gripped him harder, desperate now, refusing to let go. "Isaac, fight with me. You're not alone in this. You never were." For a brief, heart-stopping moment, Isaac's hand dropped, hanging limply by his side. The energy around them seemed to waver, as though the rift itself was hesitating. Then, Isaac's hand twitched, his fingers brushing against Elon's in a fleeting, almost imperceptible gesture. And in that instant, a surge of energy erupted from Isaac's body. The force was almost too much to comprehend. It hit Elon like a tidal wave, sending him flying backward once more. He barely had time to brace himself before the world around him seemed to collapse in on itself. Reality cracked and warped, the rift growing larger, more unstable. The last thing Elon saw before the explosion of light consumed everything was Isaac's face, twisted in pain and fear, his eyes locked onto Elon's with a mixture of hope and helplessness. And then, there was nothing but blinding light. When Elon regained consciousness, the first thing he noticed was the silence. It was unnerving. Gone were the hums of the rift, the growls of the energy that had swallowed them. Gone was the twisting, warping of reality. He opened his eyes, squinting against the brightness. The world around him was still, too still. The forest was gone, replaced by an open, barren landscape. The sky above him was clear, its unnatural pallor replaced by a soft, warm light. It was as if the rift had been sealed or destroyed. But where was Isaac? Elon, a voice whispered. He whipped around, his breath catching in his chest. There, standing a few feet away, was Isaac. But this wasn't the boy he had seen moments before, standing on the edge of the rift. This was a version of Isaac that was calm, almost serene. His face was free of the torment that had consumed him, his eyes no longer hollow with the blackness of the rift. Elon, Isaac repeated, his voice gentle but firm. It's over. Elon stood frozen, unsure of what he was seeing. Was this truly Isaac? Had they survived the storm? Or was this another version of him, something twisted by the rift's power? I'm here, Isaac said, as if reading his thoughts. I'm still me. Elon took a cautious step forward, his heart pounding. But the rift, what happened to it? What happened to you? Isaac's eyes softened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Elon saw the boy he knew. I had to let it go. I had to choose, and I chose us. Elon didn't understand, but in that moment, he realized something far more important. Isaac had found his way back, and perhaps, just perhaps, there was hope left for them yet. The quiet hum of the world around them was almost too peaceful to believe. Isaac stood there, no longer consumed by the rift, but in its place was a strange sense of calm, a serene clarity that Elon had never seen before. The boy's appearance was unchanged, but there was something different in his eyes. It was as though the weight of the rift had been lifted, yet the reality of what had just transpired still lingered in the air between them, like the remnants of a storm that had finally passed. Elon, Isaac began again, his voice steady, as though he was measuring every word. I don't know what happens next, but I'm not who I was. I'm not sure if I can ever go back to that. Elon wanted to respond, to comfort the boy, but there were no words. He had seen Isaac pushed to the edge, watched as he'd battled not just the rift, but himself. And now, Isaac stood before him, changed. It's okay, Elon said softly, taking a step toward him. You don't have to be who you were. None of us can be the same after something like this. But we'll figure this out, Isaac. Together. Isaac's eyes flickered with something like uncertainty, but he nodded slowly. The air between them felt fragile, as though anything could shatter it if they weren't careful. But there was still a question that hung over them both. A question that neither of them had the answer to. What happened to the rift? Elon asked, trying to regain some sense of control over the situation. Did we stop it? Did you? Isaac didn't immediately respond. Instead, his gaze shifted, looking past Elon to the horizon, where the landscape stretched out, vast, empty, and eerily still. There was no sign of the swirling chaos they had just escaped. The rift, the portal that had torn apart the fabric of reality, seemed to have disappeared completely. The air was clear, untainted by the dark energy that had once dominated everything. I think I chose to close it, Isaac said, as if trying to convince himself as much as Elon. I had to let go of the part of me that was tied to the rift. I had to make a choice, our choice. I could have let it consume me, but I didn't. I chose you, Elon. I chose us. Elon looked into Isaac's eyes, trying to process the enormity of what he was hearing. The rift had been so much more than a simple tear in reality. It had been alive, almost a sentient force, feeding off of Isaac's fear and brilliance. It had been feeding on him, pulling him deeper and deeper until there was no way out. And yet, Isaac had chose to fight it, to let go. Elon swallowed, his throat tight. But what does that mean? If the rift is gone, then why does it feel like we're still standing on the edge of something? Something that hasn't fully gone away? Isaac didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced around the barren landscape again, as if searching for something that wasn't there. His expression was one of deep thought, as if he were piecing together the puzzle of what had happened. I think the rift is gone, Isaac said, his voice more assured now, but still carrying a note of doubt. But something inside me, inside us, still remains. It's not like it just vanishes. The rift? It wasn't just a thing in space. It was in here. He tapped his chest lightly. It was a part of me, and now that it's gone, I don't know how much of me is still left. Elon could feel the weight of those words pressing down on him. The rift had changed Isaac on a fundamental level. Maybe it wasn't just his mind or his body that had been affected. It was his very essence. Maybe we can fix it, Elon said quietly. Maybe there's something left for us to rebuild. We'll figure it out. I won't let you go, Isaac. Not like this. Isaac met his gaze, and for a brief second, Elon thought he saw a flicker of gratitude, of something human still alive inside the boy. But then it was gone, replaced by that familiar, calm resolve. It's not that simple. Isaac's words were soft but resolute. The rift may be closed, but it doesn't mean we're free of it. It changed everything, Elon. It changed me. Elon felt a chill in his bones. If Isaac was right, then closing the rift might have only been the beginning of a new challenge, a challenge that neither of them fully understood. A challenge that Isaac, with all his genius, might not be able to handle alone. We can't do this alone, Elon said firmly. But we're not alone. You're not alone. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. We've been through too much to let go now. Isaac was silent for a moment. He looked at Elon, his eyes narrowing slightly as if assessing him, probing him for the truth in his words. Then, with a soft exhale, he nodded. I'm scared, Elon. Isaac's voice was barely audible. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what's left of me after everything that's happened. You're still Isaac, Elon said, his voice full of conviction. And that's enough. We'll find the way. Together. For a moment, Isaac seemed to hesitate. But then his gaze softened, his shoulders loosening as if a weight had been lifted. At least, a small one. Thank you, Isaac said quietly, his voice breaking slightly. Thank you for believing in me. Elon gave him a small, reassuring smile. You don't need to thank me. I've always believed in you, Isaac. You just have to believe in yourself now. Before Isaac could respond, the ground beneath them trembled once again, but this time, it wasn't the violent shaking they had felt before. It was different, calm, almost like a gentle pulse. The air around them thickened, charged with an energy that neither of them could understand. Elon's eyes widened. What's happening? Isaac's expression shifted from confusion to something darker, a flicker of realization. The rift isn't truly gone. It's evolving. A ripple of energy flowed through the ground, and before Elon could say anything else, a figure appeared before them. It was a being, tall, cloaked in a strange metallic armor that shimmered like liquid mercury. Its face was hidden behind a helmet, but the presence it exuded was unmistakable, ancient, powerful, and beyond human comprehension. The figure's voice was low, resonating through the air like a vibration that was felt more than heard. The rift may have been closed, but its legacy will never fade. And you, Isaac Thompson, are at the center of it. Isaac stepped forward, his face pale, but his eyes sharp with a renewed intensity. Who are you? What do you want? The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering the question carefully. I am the overseer of the boundaries. It paused, its voice growing deeper. And your journey has only just begun. The figure before them seemed to pulse with an energy that sent a chill down Elon's spine. Its presence was both commanding and otherworldly, like a force that had been beyond their understanding all along. The strange metallic sheen of its armor flickered in the dim light, revealing intricate patterns that seemed to change with every blink of an eye. Isaac stood tall, his hand instinctively moving toward the small device on his wrist, his last connection to the tech that had helped him survive the rift. But this new presence, the Overseer, made his every move feel like a shadow in comparison to the gravity of what was unfolding. The rift's legacy, Isaac murmured, his eyes narrowing. You said it wouldn't fade. What do you mean by that? The Overseer's voice echoed in the air, deep and measured, almost like a voice from the void. The rift was not a singular event, Isaac Thompson. It was a convergence, a breach between worlds. But that breach was never meant to heal. Elon took a step forward, his heart pounding. The truth of what they had faced and what Isaac had done was only now beginning to settle in his mind. So, the rift wasn't just an anomaly? The Overseer shook its head, the motion slow and deliberate. No, The rift was part of a greater system, a system of boundaries that connect different realities, dimensions, and planes of existence. And you, Isaac, were always meant to be at the center of it. Elon's chest tightened. Wait, what do you mean? Isaac was just a kid. He was caught up in this because of his genius, his ability to connect to the rift. The overseer turned its gaze toward Elon, and though its face was hidden, Elon could feel its attention, like an invisible weight pressing against his chest. Isaac Thompson is not just any child. He is a bridge. Isaac stiffened. The word bridge hit him like a wave. A bridge? A bridge between what? A bridge between the dimensions, the living and the forgotten, the real and the unreal. The rift was not an accident, Isaac. You were always meant to find it, to open it. And in doing so, you broke the boundaries between worlds. Elon was stunned. Are you telling us Isaac opened the rift on purpose? The overseer's voice was calm but chilling. Not on purpose, but by design. Your brilliance, Isaac, it wasn't a coincidence. It was the key that unlocked the rift's true power. And once it was opened, the rift began to pull at the very fabric of reality itself. It called to you. Isaac shook his head. I didn't know. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. The overseer's response was almost sympathetic, a rare and eerie softness in its tone. You did not choose this path, Isaac Thompson, but now you must learn how to walk it. Isaac's fists clenched. The weight of those words pressed down on him like 1,000 tons. He had fought for so long, fought against something he didn't understand, something that had tried to consume him. And now he was part of something much bigger than himself, something that had never been under his control. Elon watched Isaac, sensing the turmoil building in his friend's chest. What does that mean? What does Isaac need to do now? The overseer tilted its head slightly, considering Elon's question. You are here because the rift is not truly closed. It was only sealed, for now, but its force remains. It is waiting, watching, growing, and Isaac must choose once again. He must decide whether he will accept his place as the bridge between worlds, or whether he will turn his back on his destiny and risk everything that exists. Elon's mind raced, trying to understand the magnitude of the decision before them. The rift hadn't disappeared. It was simply dormant. And Isaac was the one who had the power to either close it forever or open it again. A power he never asked for. I didn't ask for this, Isaac muttered, his voice cracking under the weight of it all. I don't want to be a bridge. I just want to go back to normal. I just want to be me. The overseer was silent for a moment. Then, in a voice that seemed almost regretful, it spoke. Normal is an illusion, Isaac. You can never return to who you were, but you can choose to embrace what you've become. Isaac stared at the ground, his mind spinning. How could he accept this new reality, knowing that every step forward could bring about the destruction of everything he loved? Elon, Isaac's voice was barely a whisper. What do I do? How do I even begin to choose? Elon stepped closer, placing a hand on Isaac's shoulder. You don't have to figure it all out right now, Isaac. We'll find a way. You're not alone in this. I'm with you, no matter what. The overseer observed them in silence, its head cocked slightly as though it were studying the bond between them. The rift will not wait. It has a mind of its own, and it will not be sealed forever. It is only a matter of time before it calls to you again. Isaac's eyes shot up, his fear visible. How do I stop it? How do I make sure it doesn't? You can't stop it, the overseer interrupted. You can only choose how to respond. That is why you must accept your place as the bridge, Isaac. You must understand the nature of the rift and the worlds it connects. Isaac's breath came in shallow gasps. But I don't know how. I don't know anything about this. Elon's mind was racing. The world as they knew it had already been turned upside down, and now Isaac had to make another impossible choice. But this time, it was a choice not just for himself, but for all of them. You don't have to know everything, Elon said, trying to steady Isaac. We'll figure it out together, Isaac. We always do. For a moment, Isaac didn't answer. He stood there, still and silent, trying to process what was being asked of him. The overseer was right. The rift wasn't gone. It was still out there, somewhere, waiting to be unlocked again. And when it was, Isaac was the only one who could close it or open it, depending on the choice he made now. The overseer's voice interrupted the silence, cutting through Isaac's thoughts like a blade. You are ready, Isaac Thompson. The path before you is yours to walk. Will you choose to embrace your role as the bridge, or will you allow the rift to take you once again? The decision is yours. Isaac's eyes flicked between Elon and the overseer, his mind heavy with the weight of his choices. The world seemed to be closing in on him, and for the first time, he felt like he was standing at the edge of something vast and unknowable. But one thing was clear. This was no longer just his fight. It was all of theirs. The silence that followed the overseer's words was deafening. Isaac's chest tightened, his breathing shallow as his mind grappled with the enormity of the choice laid before him. The rift isn't closed. It's just waiting for me to make a decision. Isaac wanted to scream. He wanted to shout that he wasn't ready for this. That no matter how brilliant he was, no matter how many times he had solved impossible equations, he wasn't prepared for the responsibility of holding the balance of realities in his hands. But there was no time to dwell on that now. The overseer's presence was oppressive, and the weight of its words hung in the air like a storm cloud, waiting to burst. You must decide, Isaac, the overseer repeated, its voice like the sound of distant thunder. Will you take on the mantle, or will you risk the unraveling of the worlds? Isaac turned to Elon, seeking reassurance, but found none. Not because Elon wasn't there for him. Elon was always there. But because the stakes were higher than anything they had faced before. This wasn't just about saving the world. This was about keeping the very fabric of existence intact. Elon's expression was tense but resolute. He reached out and placed a hand on Isaac's shoulder, his grip firm, like a lifeline in the sea of uncertainty. Isaac, whatever you choose, you're not alone. We'll face it together, remember? Isaac swallowed hard. Together. He looked back at the overseer, who stood still, its metallic armor gleaming in the dim light like an ancient sentinel. Its presence was unsettling, but it wasn't as terrifying as it had been when it first appeared. Now, Isaac realized that it wasn't an enemy. It was a messenger, a force that was simply here to ensure the balance was kept, whatever that might mean. Isaac's mind raced. Could he really take on the responsibility of being the bridge? To control the rift, to prevent it from consuming everything, to hold the power of entire dimensions in his hands? What happens if I don't? The thought made his stomach turn. The rift was more than just a tear. It was a force, a pulse, like a living thing that could tear apart reality itself. Isaac knew this now. The rift had used him, manipulated him, but he had also chosen to fight it, to push it back. But now, the question was whether he had the strength to face it again. Isaac, Elon's voice broke through his turbulent thoughts, steady and grounding. You've already done something incredible. You've kept it contained. You have a strength inside you that you don't even realize yet. The rift might be waiting for you to unlock it again, but you don't have to do it alone. Isaac turned to Elon, his voice shaking. But what if I can't? What if I'm not strong enough? What if I make the wrong choice? Elon's eyes softened, his expression full of empathy. You've already made the hardest choice, Isaac. You fought to keep the rift from consuming you, and you didn't give up. That's what matters. Isaac's heart was still pounding in his chest, but Elon's words gave him something to hold on to. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to push aside the fear, enough to take the first step forward. He turned back to the overseer. I don't know if I can control this, Isaac said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I won't let the rift tear everything apart. I won't let it destroy the people I care about. The overseer's voice was devoid of emotion, but there was a quiet understanding in its tone. It is not about control, Isaac Thompson. It is about understanding. You will never have full control over the rift, but if you choose to embrace your role, you will learn to guide it, to understand its nature. You will shape the balance. Isaac nodded, his mind clearing just enough to think rationally. The weight of the decision was still there, heavy as stone, but it was no longer suffocating him. The rift had been an enemy, but maybe it didn't have to be. Maybe, like everything else in life, it could be understood, contained. Maybe it could be made to work with them, rather than against them. Isaac took a deep breath, stepping forward with more certainty than he'd felt in a long time. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady now. "I'll be the bridge." A faint pulse of light flickered around the overseer's form, like an unseen approval. "You are chosen." The air around them seemed to hum with energy, as if the universe itself was reacting to Isaac's decision. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and for a moment, Isaac felt as though he were being pulled in 1,000 different directions. But then, like a calming wave, the energy settled, just as quickly as it had come. The overseer raised a hand, its long fingers glowing faintly. "You will need guidance. There are others who have walked this path before you. Seek them out. And remember, Isaac Thompson, the rift will never truly be sealed unless you understand its true nature." Isaac nodded, the weight of the task still pressing down on him, but now tempered by a sense of purpose. He wasn't alone in this. He had Elon. He had the chance to rebuild, to learn from the past and make sure it wasn't repeated. The overseer slowly began to fade, its presence dissolving into the air, leaving nothing but an empty space behind. Elon looked at Isaac, a mixture of concern and pride on his face. "Are you sure about this? You don't have to rush. We can figure things out together. Take it slow." Isaac smiled faintly, exhaustion in his eyes, but a new light in his heart. "I'm sure. I have to do this. For us. For everyone." Elon nodded. "Then let's go. We'll face whatever comes next. Together." As the overseer's final words echoed in the space around them, Isaac felt something shift inside him. A new understanding, a new awareness of the power he now carried. It wasn't something he could control or wield in a conventional way. It was something that connected him to everything around him. The rift, the worlds, the endless possibilities. For the first time, Isaac understood. Being the bridge didn't mean holding everything together. It meant understanding when to let go, when to guide, and when to stand firm. And in that moment, Isaac knew that he would make the right choice. The weeks that followed Isaac's decision to embrace his role as the bridge were a blur of new beginnings and unfamiliar paths. For the first time in his life, Isaac Thompson was beginning to understand the magnitude of the power he now carried. But with that understanding came the weight of responsibility, a burden that he didn't ask for, yet was irrevocably tied to. He had begun to study the rift more, searching for answers that might explain how to control it, how to prevent it from swallowing everything they knew. The overseer's cryptic words still echoed in his mind, a constant reminder that the rift was not merely an anomaly. It was an integral part of a vast and unknowable system, a system that was connected to every other dimension, every other reality. Isaac had pored over the ancient texts they had recovered from the rift's origin point. Symbols that made no sense at first, equations that seemed to defy logic, and diagrams that appeared to show a network of connections between worlds. He had spent hours, days, even weeks studying them with Elon by his side, offering both support and the occasional distraction when Isaac's mind became too overwhelmed. But despite his progress, despite his understanding of the rift's mechanics, something still gnawed at him, an unsettling feeling that no matter how much he learned, it would never be enough. The rift was still a mystery, a force that he couldn't entirely grasp. One evening, after a particularly long study session, Isaac found himself standing alone in the empty lab, staring at the glowing map of the rift's current position projected on the wall in front of him. His mind raced as the symbols swirled in his head, combining in ways that defied explanation. "This isn't enough," he thought. "I need to understand more. I need to connect the dots." As he leaned in closer, the edges of his vision began to blur. The familiar hum of the lab's machines faded into the background, replaced by the soft, whispering echoes of the rift calling to him once more. Isaac could feel it. The pull. The rift had always been there, lingering just beneath the surface of his thoughts. But now, it was more than that. It was as if it were trying to communicate with him, its presence growing stronger, like a pulse beneath his skin. And then, suddenly a voice. Soft, distant, and yet unmistakable. "Isaac." He spun around, but there was no one there. Just the empty lab, the hum of machines, the stillness of the night. "Isaac, you must seek them. The voice was clear now, a resonance that vibrated in the air, sending a shiver down his spine. It wasn't the overseer's voice, nor was it anything he had heard before. It was something else, something familiar, yet foreign. Before Isaac could respond, the lab door swung open and Elon entered, his face lined with concern. "Isaac." Elon's voice was gentle but filled with worry. "You okay? You look lost." Isaac shook his head, the vision of the voice fading as quickly as it had come. He blinked a few times, trying to shake the lingering feeling of being pulled into something far bigger than himself. "I heard it again," Isaac said, his voice shaky. "The voice. It told me to seek them." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Seek who? You mean the overseer?" Isaac's eyes darted back to the glowing map of the rift. No, this was different. It wasn't the overseer. This felt like a warning. Like I'm being pulled in a direction I don't understand. Elon frowned, walking closer to Isaac. "Maybe you're overthinking it. I know the pressure's a lot, but—" "No," Isaac interrupted. "It's not just pressure. It's like something is reaching out to me. Like it wants me to find something or someone." Elon stopped in his tracks, staring at Isaac with a mix of concern and curiosity. "You think this has to do with the rift? Like there's someone else out there who can help?" Isaac nodded slowly. "I think so. The rift, it's not just a tear in space and time. It's connected to something much deeper. And if I'm going to stop it, I need to find who's on the other side. Someone who knows what this all means." Elon considered this for a long moment. Then, with a determined nod, he placed a hand on Isaac's shoulder. "We'll figure it out. Together. But if you're going after something, then I'm coming with you. You're not going through this alone." Isaac looked up at his friend, gratitude washing over him. Together. That word was becoming more and more meaningful to him. He didn't have to carry this burden alone. "Thanks, Elon. But we need to be careful. The rift is unpredictable. We don't know what's waiting for us on the other side." Elon smiled, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Since when have we ever been careful? But seriously, you're right. We'll make a plan. We'll find answers." Isaac nodded, already feeling a sense of relief. No matter how dangerous this journey might be, he knew Elon would be there. They had faced the impossible before, and they would do it again. Days later, Isaac and Elon stood at the entrance of an ancient, forgotten building that had been buried beneath layers of time and earth. It was a place that had long been abandoned, hidden from the world's memory. Yet it was here that the rift's signals had led them, drawing them to the very heart of what they were searching for. The building's stone walls were cracked and worn with age, but there was something undeniably magnetic about the place. It hummed with a strange energy, the air thick with a sense of the unknown. Isaac felt a chill as they stepped inside, the echo of their footsteps reverberating through the hollow structure. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, as if the building itself was watching them, waiting. Elon's voice broke the silence. "You feel that? It's like the air's alive." Isaac didn't answer immediately. His senses were on high alert, his instincts telling him that they were getting closer to the truth. This place, whatever it was, held the key to understanding the rift. They moved deeper into the building, their steps slow and cautious. The air grew colder as they descended into the depths of the structure, until they reached a vast chamber. It was unlike anything Isaac had ever seen. The walls were covered in strange symbols and patterns that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which rested an ancient device. It was unlike anything Isaac had encountered before, its design sleek and elegant, yet it hummed with an undeniable power. Isaac stepped forward, his breath caught in his throat. "This is it. This is what we've been searching for." Elon was right behind him, his voice filled with awe. "What is it?" Isaac's mind raced, piecing together the symbols and the patterns that danced across the walls. "I don't know yet, but it's connected to the rift. I can feel it." He reached out to touch the device, and as his fingers made contact, the room seemed to shift. The walls glowed brighter, the air thick with energy. And then, as if on cue, the voice returned. "Isaac." This time, the voice was clearer than ever. Isaac's heart raced, his entire body trembling. The rift was calling him again. You have come. You have found the key. Isaac's eyes widened. The key? The key to what? The voice was almost sorrowful now. The key to your choice. To your destiny. The rift will only be sealed when you understand what binds the worlds. And you must choose. Isaac's breath caught in his throat. What was he supposed to do now? The answer was within his grasp, but the burden of it all was nearly too much to bear. The rift was calling to him, louder than ever. And this time, Isaac wasn't sure he could resist its pull. The air in the chamber was thick with energy, vibrating with a force that made Isaac's skin tingle. He stood frozen, his fingers still resting lightly on the ancient device. The voice, that voice, was in his mind again, not just echoing through the room but resonating deep within him. The key, Isaac whispered, barely able to understand the weight of those two words. What was the key? What did it unlock? What did it mean for the rift, for the fate of reality itself? The voice responded, its tone soft but commanding. You already know, Isaac Thompson. You are the key. The path forward lies within you. But it is your choice whether you accept this truth or walk away. Isaac's heart pounded in his chest as the realization began to dawn. He wasn't just studying the rift. He wasn't merely its keeper, or the one who would learn how to control it. He was the key. He was the bridge between worlds, between realities, between dimensions. All the time he had spent reading, theorizing, battling against the rift, it had been leading to this moment. And now, the choice had fallen on him. Elon's voice broke through his thoughts, filled with concern. Isaac, what's going on? Are you all right? Isaac turned to face his friend, but his eyes were distant, the weight of the voice and the knowledge settling over him like a thick fog. Elon, it's not just about the rift anymore. The rift, it's part of me. The device, this place, it's all connected. I am the key, and the rift will never be sealed unless I... He didn't know how to finish the sentence. He didn't know what this meant, what it required of him. Elon stepped closer, his hand resting on Isaac's shoulder, grounding him. Isaac, you don't have to do this alone. Whatever choice you make, I'm with you. Isaac's lips parted as he met Elon's gaze. He's with me. Always. The voice in his mind stirred again, more insistent now. You must decide, Isaac. The rift's power grows stronger with each passing moment. Your decision will shape the future of all worlds. Isaac's pulse quickened. The weight of the words, the promise of something far greater than he could understand. It was too much to carry alone. The temptation to turn away was strong, to step back and pretend this wasn't happening, to leave the burden behind. But he couldn't, because if he did, if he ran, then everything he had worked for, everything he had fought for, would be lost. And the rift? It would consume everything. The universe, the world, everything he loved. His eyes drifted back to the pedestal, to the device that hummed with power. It was so simple, so ancient, yet so impossibly complex. He could feel it calling to him, pulling at his very core. The answer was here, somewhere between the symbols, the energy, the force that surrounded him. But what did it want from him? Isaac took a deep breath and steadied his nerves. This was his moment. The choice would define everything. I have to understand it, Isaac said, more to himself than to Elon. I have to understand the rift's purpose, why it exists, what it's connected to. Elon nodded, his expression serious but filled with unshakable trust. We'll figure it out. We always do. Just be careful, okay? Isaac nodded, then turned back to the device. His hand hovered over it for a moment before he pressed his fingers against the cool surface. Immediately, the symbols on the walls flared to life, glowing brighter and brighter, until the entire room was bathed in an intense light. The hum of the device grew louder, vibrating through his bones. And then, the voice. You are not alone in this, Isaac. The choice is not just yours. It has always been yours, and yet. The voice stopped suddenly, as though it had been interrupted. The light in the room flickered, and for a split second, the air was thick with tension. You must remember. Remember who you were. Remember who you can become. Isaac's mind reeled, a cascade of memories flooding his thoughts. Images of his childhood, of his parents, of the moments he had spent learning, struggling, growing. He saw the faces of his friends, Elon, the ones he had lost, and the ones who had helped him along the way. And then, amidst the flood of memories, a singular thought broke through the noise. He was meant for this. He was meant to understand the rift. It was the culmination of everything he had been, everything he had learned, every moment of brilliance, every moment of failure. All of it had led him to this place. A sudden jolt of energy passed through him, and Isaac gasped. The device on the pedestal glowed with an intensity that made the walls tremble. Symbols that were once incomprehensible to him began to shift, revealing hidden meanings and patterns that intertwined like a web. You must take the step. The rift is not a thing to fear. It is a thing to understand. Isaac reached out once more, his hand trembling as he touched the device again. The symbols on the walls began to rotate, revealing pathways, paths to other worlds, other dimensions. The rift was not just a tear in the fabric of reality. It was a doorway, a connection. Isaac felt a rush of understanding wash over him. The rift, in all its terrible power, was simply a tool, a mechanism, one that had been placed in the universe to connect the multitudes of realities. And now he was the one who could control it. He could shape the connection. He could bridge the gap between worlds. But as the realization hit, so did the weight of his responsibility. He wasn't just a guardian of the rift. He was the one who would decide its fate, the fate of every dimension it touched. And it was up to him to ensure it didn't spiral out of control. You are the one who must choose, Isaac. The voice returned, now calm, as if it had always known this would happen. The rift will either bring salvation or destruction. The choice is yours. Isaac closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the universe pressing down on him. He wasn't ready. He was just a kid. But he knew, deep down, that he had to be. The rift was part of him now. And whether he was ready or not, he had to take the next step. He looked at Elon, who stood by his side, his expression one of unwavering loyalty and trust. Isaac smiled, trying to steady his nerves. I have to do this, Isaac said, his voice low but filled with determination. I have to understand the rift. I have to make the choice. Elon gave a brief nod, his hand resting on Isaac's back in silent support. I know you can. Whatever happens, we'll figure it out. Together. Isaac took one last deep breath before turning back to the device. The path ahead wasn't clear. It wasn't easy. But for the first time, he felt a sense of peace in the chaos. And so, Isaac reached for the key. The rift would be sealed, but only if he understood its true purpose. Isaac's fingers brushed the surface of the device, and as soon as he made contact, an intense flash of light erupted around him. The walls of the chamber warped and flickered, transforming into a tapestry of galaxies, stars, and swirling, infinite dimensions. Time seemed to lose its meaning as reality itself twisted and bent, revealing glimpses of worlds beyond comprehension. For a moment, Isaac was weightless, suspended in a space between spaces, between worlds. He could hear the voice again, not in his ears but deep within his mind, resonating through every part of him. It was the same voice, but now it carried an added urgency, an urgency that pulled at the very core of his being. The rift is not just a tear, Isaac. It is a passage through the heart of all things. Isaac struggled to focus, his body trembling, his mind racing. The voice wasn't just speaking. It was unfolding the truth of the universe, unraveling the very fabric of existence before his eyes. Passage through all things? Isaac repeated, his voice barely a whisper in the void. Yes, the rift is not an enemy. It is a doorway, a means of crossing between realities. But it is not the only one. There are others, and they are unstable. You, Isaac, are the anchor. You are the one who can restore balance. Balance. The word echoed in Isaac's mind, pulling him deeper into the swirl of infinite possibilities. He could see it now, the rift, not just a chaotic tear in reality, but a thread woven into the grand tapestry of existence, part of a much larger system. A system of balance, of connectedness. And he was the one who could either maintain it or unravel it. The vision began to stabilize, and Isaac found himself back in the chamber, his hands still on the device. The symbols on the walls had stopped swirling, settling into a complex grid of interlocking paths and glowing markers. Each path represented a potential reality, a dimension that could be influenced, shifted, or even destroyed. And all of them connected through the rift. Isaac's heart beat faster. His choice was no longer a matter of simply closing the rift. It was a matter of whether to accept control over this web of worlds, whether to become the force that guided their interconnected destinies, or the one that let them collapse. A shadow moved at the edge of the chamber, and Isaac snapped his head around to find Elon standing there, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and concern. He had seen the transformation, the light, the rift's full power manifesting. He could feel it too, the magnitude of what Isaac was facing. "Isaac, what's happening?" Elon's voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of worry. "What's going on in your head? Are you okay?" Isaac could barely speak, the enormity of the choice overwhelming him. Elon, it's not just a tear in reality. It's a system, a network, and I'm the one who can hold it together. But if I choose wrong, if I don't do this right?" Elon stepped closer, his expression softening. "I get it. This is huge. But you're not alone in this, Isaac. Whatever you choose, we're in this together." Isaac glanced at him, his heart swelling with gratitude. But deep down, he knew the truth. This was his burden to bear, his choice to make. There was no turning back now. The voice in his mind echoed again, but this time, it was quieter, more intimate. "Isaac Thompson, the time has come. The rift grows unstable. You must decide. The balance of all worlds rests in your hands." Isaac closed his eyes, trying to center himself, trying to grasp the gravity of what was at stake. If he allowed the rift to remain open, it would continue to fracture the fabric of reality. But if he chose to close it permanently, would the other dimensions cease to exist? Would he be sealing away possibilities, keeping countless worlds in the dark, untouchable and unreachable? The more he thought about it, the more it felt like an impossible choice. But then, like a spark in the darkness, something clicked. "I don't have to close it or destroy it," Isaac said, his voice filled with certainty. "I just need to control it. I need to guide it, to balance it." He turned to Elon, his eyes alight with realization. The rift isn't the problem. The problem is that no one's understood it before. No one's known how to navigate it, how to control the connections between the worlds. Elon's expression shifted from worry to cautious hope. "So, you think you can control it?" Isaac took a deep breath, staring at the device as it pulsed with energy. He had no idea what he was about to do, but he knew one thing for certain. He had to try. This wasn't just about saving the world he knew. It was about saving everything. "I have to control it," Isaac said, his voice firm, "for the sake of every world that depends on it. If I don't, everything will collapse." The voice echoed again, but this time it was softer, almost approving. "You have chosen, Isaac. The path is now clear." Isaac didn't hesitate. He pressed his hand fully against the device, his fingers sinking into its smooth surface. The symbols on the walls began to shift once more, aligning into a single, unified path that stretched out into infinity. The rift's energy surged, filling the chamber with an almost deafening hum. A brilliant light erupted from the device, engulfing Isaac and Elon. The room around them dissolved into pure light, and for a moment, there was no sound, no time, no sense of place. Isaac felt himself being pulled, not physically, but mentally, across the rift, through dimensions, through the very threads of reality itself. He could see them now, the worlds, the countless possibilities. He was no longer just a part of this reality. He was part of the entire multiverse, and he could feel them all, the connections, the fragile threads that held each world together. He understood now. The rift wasn't just a tear. It was a connection, and he was the one who could guide it. The light began to fade, and Isaac felt himself return to the chamber. The symbols on the walls had stopped glowing, the device now dormant. But Isaac knew that the rift itself, was no longer something to fear. He had anchored it. He had found its balance. Elon stepped forward, his eyes wide. Isaac, what did you just do? Isaac exhaled slowly, a deep sense of peace settling over him. I didn't just close it, Elon. I became part of it. I became the balance between the worlds. Elon nodded slowly, the weight of Isaac's words sinking in. You're not just a genius, Isaac. You're a bridge. A bridge between everything. Isaac smiled, his mind still racing with the knowledge he had unlocked. But for the first time, he felt at peace. He didn't have all the answers, but he didn't need them. The journey was far from over. But now, at least, he had a purpose. Together, they had found the way forward. And the rift, now and forever, would be a part of them. The chamber was quiet, save for the soft hum of the device, now dormant in the center of the room. Isaac stood at its side, his mind still buzzing with the knowledge he had unlocked. He could feel the threads of reality, delicate and interconnected, stretching out before him like a vast and intricate web. The power of the rift no longer felt threatening. It felt like something he could guide, something he could control. The silence in the room felt comforting now. There was no more overwhelming energy surging through the walls, no more feeling of instability. The rift was still there, but it was contained, balanced. Elon, standing beside him, looked just as awestruck as Isaac felt. His eyes, wide with a mixture of disbelief and awe, reflected the weight of what Isaac had just accomplished. Well, that's one hell of a trick, Elon said quietly, shaking his head as if he couldn't quite process what had happened. Isaac chuckled softly, still not entirely sure how he had done it. But the overwhelming sense of peace within him told him that it had worked. He had made the right choice. He had taken control. I didn't do anything, Elon, Isaac said, turning to his friend with a smile. I didn't close the rift. I didn't destroy it. I became part of it. I balanced it. Elon shook his head, his expression softening. You've just saved everything, Isaac. You are the key. Isaac's smile faded as he glanced around the room, his mind still processing the enormity of what had just transpired. The rift, the device, the vast web of realities. It wasn't just something to be studied or shut away. It was a part of the universe itself. A tool, yes, but also a force that connected all things. And Isaac had become its guardian, its anchor. He wasn't just saving one world. He was saving every world. We're not done yet, Isaac said, his voice thoughtful. This is just the beginning. The rift is stable, for now, but the knowledge, the responsibility, it's all still so new. I can't just sit back and hope everything stays balanced. We need to understand more about how it works, how to control it fully. Elon nodded, his face serious now. We'll figure it out. Together, like always. Isaac's gaze drifted to the pedestal, where the device had been resting just moments ago. It had shifted from something dangerous to something that now felt like a key to a new kind of knowledge, a new kind of understanding. He could feel its potential, its power, pulsing in the air. He wasn't sure if it was the device itself or his connection to the rift, but it was as though his mind could reach across time and space, touching every corner of the universe. I think it's time we tell the world, Isaac said, breaking the silence. Tell them what's happened, what we've learned. Elon's eyes met his, and for a moment, they didn't need words. They both understood. They had discovered something so profound that it couldn't be kept hidden any longer. The universe had always been connected, always been one vast, intricate system. And now, Isaac had become a part of it. You're right, Elon agreed, his voice steady and resolute. But we're going to need help. We need more people to understand the gravity of this. People who won't be blinded by fear, but who can see the bigger picture. People who will work with us to make sure the rift stays in balance. Isaac nodded, his thoughts already racing ahead. They couldn't face this alone. They would need experts, scientists, philosophers, even spiritual leaders, people who could help them understand the rift from every angle and guide them as they navigated its mysteries. But there was one thing that Isaac knew for sure now. He had to be the one to lead. The rift had shown him the way forward, and now it was up to him to share that path with the world. He turned to Elon, a determined look in his eyes. We're going to change everything. But first, we need to make sure the rift stays in balance, and we need to get the right people on our side. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about all of us. Elon's gaze softened with understanding. So, we start small, bring the right people in, and work from there. Isaac smiled. It was a start, and that was all he needed. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Isaac and Elon began reaching out to some of the world's leading scientists, thinkers, and experts in various fields. They gathered a small but powerful team, one that was willing to see beyond the fear of the unknown and embrace the potential of the rift. Together, they began to unravel the mysteries of the multiverse, discovering not just new worlds, but new possibilities. The rift, as it turned out, was more than just a connection between realities. It was a way of understanding all of existence. It was a bridge that connected everything, every thought, every dream, every possibility. But even as they made progress, there were challenges ahead. The rift was unstable at times, and even with Isaac's connection to it, there were moments when its power surged uncontrollably. Each time, Isaac and his team worked together to stabilize it, but they knew it was only a matter of time before the rift would test them again. In the meantime, word of Isaac's discovery spread. People from around the world began to take notice of the work they were doing. Some were fearful of the potential dangers, but others saw the hope in what Isaac had done. They saw the possibility of a future where worlds weren't separate, but connected, where knowledge and understanding could flow freely between them. Isaac knew that they had only just begun to scratch the surface of what was possible. The rift was far more than they could have ever imagined, and the challenges they faced were just beginning. But Isaac was ready. He had made his choice, and now he was prepared to lead the way into the future. As he stood before the team, his heart filled with purpose, Isaac knew that this was just the beginning of something much, much greater. The future was unfolding before him, and he would be there to shape it. With the rift under his control, there was no limit to what they could achieve. The universe, the multiverse, was open to them now, and it was up to Isaac and his team to make sure they used that power wisely. "Let's make sure we're ready for whatever comes next," Isaac said, looking at Elon and the team around him. Together, they took the first steps into a future filled with infinite possibilities. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?